Chapter 21-26. The Heavenly Policy Palace was very lively because of Li Chun's succession ceremony. Of course, this had no effect on Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao, as the two of them were still in the Heavenly Policy secret realm, tirelessly refining and absorbing the energy of the martial stars. The Heavenly Policy Palace was very lively because of Li Chun's succession ceremony. Of course, this had no effect on Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao, as the two of them were still in the Heavenly Policy secret realm, tirelessly refining and absorbing the energy of the martial stars. It was impossible to feel the flow of time in the Heavenly Policy secret realm. Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao did not know how long it had been since they had entered the Heavenly Policy secret realm. As usual, Xiao Chun had just finished refining a martial star and was about to continue refining. However, at that moment, the martial stars that were originally emitting a faint glow suddenly disappeared. The entire space turned dark. Xiao Chun was slightly taken aback by this. It was also at this moment that Xiao Xiao, who had also finished refining a martial star, said, "Looks like it's time." The time that Xiao Xiao mentioned was the time when the Heavenly Policy secret realm would close. The disappearance of the martial stars also indicated that the Heavenly Policy secret realm was about to close. Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun said somewhat disappointedly, "I still wanted to make a breakthrough. What a pity. Greedy. Do you think that constitution can be broken through so easily? The harvest this time is already great enough," Xiao Chun chided with a smile. Xiao Chun and Xiao Zhao's harvest from this trip to the Heavenly Policy secret realm was indeed great. First of all, their constitution had broken through from the Great Perfection realm to the Minor Perfection realm. Secondly, their cultivation had also broken through to the Minor Perfection realm. Such progress was already very good. Upon hearing Xiao Zhao's words, Xiao Chun nodded helplessly. He naturally knew this, but who wouldn't want to become stronger? Of course, this was just a thought. After all, breaking through wasn't something that could be achieved just by thinking about it. The Heavenly Policy secret realm was about to close, and many martial stars had disappeared without a trace. In the following time, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao waited patiently for the Heavenly Policy secret realm to close. They did not have to wait for long before an unknown force enveloped Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao. After that, the two of them were successfully sent out of the Heavenly Policy secret realm. After returning to the Heavenly Policy mansion and leaving the Heavenly Policy secret realm, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao felt a gaze that they had not felt for a long time. At the same time, they also saw Li Chun, who had specially come to pick them up. Facing Li Chun, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao still did not know about the changes in the Great Thousand Realms. They also did not know that Li Chun was now the Heavenly Policy Palace's palace master. He casually greeted Li Chun. Seeing this, Li Chun smiled and calmly said, "Looks like all of you have gained quite a lot." "Not bad, I guess," Xiao Chun replied with a smile upon hearing this. The three of them casually chatted for a while before they arrived at Jun Wuya and Luo Xing's residence. When they saw Jun Wuya and Luo Xing, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao bowed respectfully. Then, everyone sat together and talked about the things that had happened in the Great Thousand Realms over the past year. When they found out that Dao Ju and Li Chun had become the palace masters of the Saber Sect and the Heavenly Policy Mansion, respectively, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao were surprised. They did not expect Dao Xiong and Li Xiao to give up their positions. They looked at Li Chun in surprise. Facing Xiao Chun and Xiao Zhao's gazes, Li Chun said calmly, "Dao Ju and I are nothing. However, the Great Thousand Realms has indeed changed greatly over the past year. It is almost unrecognizable." "Oh, tell me about it." Upon hearing this, Xiao Chun asked with great interest. Knowing Li Chun's character, he would definitely not exaggerate. In this case, since he had said so, the great wide world had probably changed a lot in the past year. In the face of Xiao Chun's question, Li Chun did not hide anything and said calmly, "To put it simply, it is the change of era. In a year, except for the Dragon Palace, almost all the palace masters of the major forces have been replaced by the younger generation." According to Li Chun, from the beginning, when Dao Xiong and Li Shao abdicated, the Great Thousand Realms seemed to have set off a storm. Many experts of the older generation chose to retreat behind the scenes and became ancestor-level figures. The power of the sects was also handed over to a group of young geniuses. Dan Valley, Weapons Sect, Talisman Sect, Hitian Sect, Mutian Mountain, Shrines, Black Emperor Sect, Taiching Temple, and many other forces, regardless of whether they were strong or weak, were like this. It was no exaggeration to say that the Great Thousand Realms was now controlled by the younger generation. Not to mention the other forces, just the 10 great Lingtian sects. Only the Dragon Palace and the Moon Palace had not changed their palace masters. Needless to say, the Moon Palace was definitely because of Xiao Xiao. After all, Xiao Xiao was in the Heavenly Strategy's secret realm. Even if Luo Xing wanted to abdicate, he could only wait until Xiao Xiao left the Heavenly Strategy's secret realm. However, at this time, Xiao Xiao and Xiao Chun had already returned from the Heavenly Strategy's secret realm. It would not be long before Xiao Xiao succeeded as the palace master of the Moon Palace. As for the Dragon Palace, it was because Long Qing did not have such prestige for the time being. Therefore, even if Long Yuan wanted to abdicate, it was not possible for the time being. However, according to various signs, Long Yuan had already begun to let Long Qing intervene in the affairs of the Dragon Palace. Obviously, he intended to cultivate Long Qing to be the next palace master of the Dragon Palace. In just a short year, the Great Thousand World had indeed changed a lot, so much so that it was a little ridiculous. The older generation of powerhouses had retired one after another, allowing the Great Thousand World to completely enter a new era. Compared to the past, the people who were truly in charge of the various major sects in the Great Thousand World had changed from the older generation to the younger generation of supreme talents. This was the change of the era. Upon hearing Li Chun's words, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao were slightly stunned. The two of them did not expect that in just a short year, the Great Thousand World would have changed so much. The change of an era seemed to have been completely completed in just a year. The current Great Thousand World had become the world of the younger generation, and the younger generation would set new rules. After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, Xiao Chun poured a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp. The change of the old and new eras? It seems that the Great Thousand World will be even more exciting in the future. Xiao Chun could already foresee that after this change of the old and new eras, the Great Thousand World would be even more exciting and turbulent in the future. This was because with the rise of the younger generation, many of the rules and regulations left by the older generation would probably be broken. In order to break these rules and set new rules, the first thing to do was to destroy everything formed by the previous era, and then reconstruct a set of rules that belonged to the new era, which belonged to the younger generation. Fighting and chaos would probably soon become the main colors of the Great Thousand World. After all, the younger generation was a generation full of vigor, and they were unwilling to be mediocre. The Great Thousand World, which had maintained peace for many years, was probably going to usher in a great change and turmoil. Please collect, vote, recommend. The error-free chapters of Sword Master Vast Expanse will continue to be updated in the hand-fighting bar. There are no advertisements in the website. Please collect and recommend the hand-fighting bar. If you like Sword Master Vast Expanse, please collect Sword Master Vast Expanse. Chapter 21-27. In just a year, the situation in the Great Thousand World had completely changed. The powerhouses of the older generation had all chosen to retreat behind the scenes and give the stage to the younger generation. In just a year, the situation in the Great Thousand World had completely changed. The powerhouses of the older generation had all chosen to retreat behind the scenes and give the stage to the younger generation. One could almost predict that the Great Thousand World would be very exciting and chaotic in the following period of time. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's sigh, Li Chun said indifferently, "However, Xiao Chun, you're under the greatest pressure now. After all, the Sword Sect has yet to be ranked as one of the 10 great Lingtian sects." Li Chun was very direct. The Sword Sect was indeed not one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. Therefore, if Shao Chun wanted to reach the peak, he first had to let the sword sect return to the 10 great Lingtian sects. This was not an easy task. Even though the sword sect already had Junwuya, the overall strength of the sword sect was still incomparable to any of the 10 great Lingtian sects. Upon hearing Li Chun's words, Shao Chun did not refute because this was the truth. The great changes in the Great Thousand World could not be stopped by a single person. This was the inevitable result of the current of time. Therefore, after hearing Li Chun's words, although Shao Chun and Xiao Xiao were shocked, they quickly accepted it. A few days later, Shao Chun and the rest stayed in the Heavenly Policy Mansion for another 2 days. Then, Shao Chun and Junwuya returned to the Sword Sect, while Xiao Xiao returned to the Moon Palace with Luo Xing previously. They had already heard from Luo Xing that she intended to pass the position of Palace Master to Xiao Xiao and would probably announce it to the public soon. Shao Chun naturally could not intervene in the matters of the Moon Palace. Moreover, it had been a long time since he left the Sword Sect, so there were probably many matters in the Sword Sect waiting for Shao Chun to deal with. Together with Junwuya, they safely returned to the Sword Sect. Just as Shao Chun and Junwuya arrived at the Sword Sect, Song Xing, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Nangong Guan, and the rest came forward to greet them. They first bowed respectfully to Junwuya and said, "Ancestor, Master." He then looked at Shao Chun and said, "Greetings, sect leader." Facing the crowd, Junwuya only nodded his head indifferently. He did not say anything, nor did he stay for long. He immediately left. Just as Junwuya had said at the start, he would not bother about the small matters of the Sword Sect. As such, he had no intention of interfering. Knowing Junwuya's personality, only after Junwuya left did Shao Chun and the others come to the main hall of the Sword Sect. Here, Shao Chun saw Yang Song and the others who he had not seen in a long time. Before, Shao Chun sent Yang Song and the others to the Dan Valley to find a chance to break through to the End Realm. Now, many years had passed, and Yang Song had successfully broken through to become an End Realm expert. Seeing Yang Song successfully break through and return, Shao Chun was naturally delighted. However, very quickly, Shao Chun also received bad news from Yang Song. Out of the people who went to the Dan Valley to cultivate with Yang Song, only Yang Song had successfully broken through to the End Realm. The others were unable to break through. This was indeed a fly in the ointment. After all, in order for the Dan Valley to provide a cultivation secret realm, Shao Chun had paid a heavy price. However, in the end, only Yang Song had successfully broken through. Seeing Shao Chun's disappointed expression, Song Xing consoled him. "Sect leader, there is nothing we can do about it. After all, breaking through to the End Realm is extremely difficult. For Yang Song to be able to break through is already a huge fortune. I know that, but it's human nature to be greedy, isn't it?" Hearing this, Shao Chun smiled in a carefree manner and quickly adjusted his mood. At the start, when he heard that only Yang Song had broken through to the End Realm, Shao Chun couldn't help but be disappointed. However, thinking about it, as Song Xing had said, for one person to break through to the End Realm was already a huge fortune. After all, breaking through to the End Realm wasn't a simple matter. On the contrary, it was extremely difficult. After adjusting his mood, Shao Chun looked towards Yang Song and smiled. Yang Song Sr. being able to break through is already a huge fortune. Since Senior Yang Song has broken through to the End Realm, then our Sword Sect strength has increased by another level. One more End Realm expert, even if he had just broken through, was extremely helpful to the overall strength of the Sword Sect. Yang Song had successfully broken through to the End Realm. With that, his identity naturally rose from Sword Head to Deputy Sect Leader. Yang Song's promotion to Deputy Sect Leader naturally delighted the entire Sword Sect. That night, Yang Song also held a banquet and invited everyone in the Sword Sect to celebrate. Shao Chun also joined the banquet. During the banquet, Shao Chun, Song Xing, Nangong Guan, Zhou Song, and Wu Huan talked about the changes in the world in the past year. With regards to the changes over the past year, Song Xing and the other three sighed from the bottom of their hearts. The current Great Thousand World has completely changed. With the younger generation in charge, it's really hard to say what the situation will be like in the future. That's right. After all, with the younger generation in charge, everyone has different personalities and ambitions. Who knows what the world will be like in the future? Nangongwan said. The four of them sighed. However, very quickly, Zhou Song said with a gloomy expression, "Sect leader, the heavenly sect has been a little strange recently. They have already sent 3 to 4 batches of spies to the Sor province. Although we have been sending people to clear them out, the heavenly sect has no intention of giving up. The heavenly sect have been sending spies to the Sword province." Xiao Chun didn't believe that they were here to play. According to what Zhou Song said, they had already sent 3 to 4 batches of spies. Many of them had already been killed by the Sword sect. However, the heavenly sect still didn't plan on stopping. Hearing Zhou Song's words, a cold intent flashed in Xiao Chen's eyes. However, very quickly he laughed coldly. Is Yang Chun trying to use my sword sect to show off his might? He just became the sect leader of the heavenly sect, and he's already planning to act against my sword sect? Yang Chun was the new sect leader of the heavenly sect. He was also Tao Ming's disciple and a genius in the Great Thousand World. Previously, Xiao Chun had heard about Yang Chun from Li Chun. He knew that Tao Ming had passed the position of sect leader of the heavenly sect to Yang Chun. Although he had never had any interaction with Yang Chun, Xiao Chun instinctively didn't have any good impression of Yang Chun because of his relationship with the heavenly sect. Moreover, judging from Yang Chun's actions after he became the sect leader of the heavenly sect, he was obviously the kind of person who didn't want to be left out. He had just taken over the heavenly sect, and he couldn't wait to test the sword sect. Was he trying to complete what Tao Ming had failed to do? With a sneer, Xiao Chun said indifferently, "Then kill them. Kill all the spies of the heavenly sect. I want to see how many people Yang Chun can send to the Sor province." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 21-28. Although Xiao Chun didn't know what Yang Chun wanted to do for the time being, no matter what Yang Chun's intentions were, Xiao Chun couldn't let him succeed. Killing the spies of the heavenly sect who had secretly infiltrated the Sor province was the first step. Since Yang Chun kept sending spies into the Sor province, Xiao Chun would kill them until Yang Chun had no more spies to send. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Song Xing and the others nodded respectfully. After being the sect leader for so many years, Xiao Chun's prestige in the sword sect had been completely established. Even the deputy sect leaders like Song Xing didn't dare to disobey Xiao Chun's orders in the slightest. After giving the order to kill the spies of the heavenly sect, Xiao Chun paused for a moment before continuing. In addition, send people to Tianzhou to find out what Yang Chun wants to do, as well as the current situation of the heavenly sect. Killing the spies of the heavenly sect was only the first step. Xiao Chun knew that from now on, he would probably have a new opponent. From the series of actions Yang Chun had taken after taking over as the sect leader of the heavenly sect, Yang Chun was obviously hostile to the sword sect. Although he didn't know what kind of person Yang Chun was, based on the current situation, he and Yang Chun were destined to be enemies because of the relationship between the sword sect and the heavenly sect. Yang Chun's actions against the sword sect were actually a microcosm of the transition between the old and the new. Because Yang Chun had become the sect leader of the heavenly sect, the relationship between the heavenly sect and the sword sect would probably change. From the current situation, this change would obviously make the already tense relationship between the two sects even more hostile. After Xiao Chun's 2 orders were given, Song Xing, Zhou Song, Nangongwan, and the others naturally carried them out. Xiao Chun didn't stay long at the banquet. After all, many people were nervous with Xiao Chun here. Therefore, Xiao Chun only exchanged a few words with Song Xing and the others. After explaining some matters regarding the heavenly sect, Xiao Chun stood up and left. Xiao Chun hurriedly returned to his cave residence. It had been a long time since he last saw Qin Shiru and the other girls. He missed them very much. While Xiao Chun was returning to the Sword Gate, on the other side, in Yang Chen's cave abode in the heavenly gate of the Tianzhou, 2 elders of the Heavenly Gate were standing respectfully in front of Yang Chun, who was sitting on the main seat. He was wearing a gray robe, and his figure was a little thin. His appearance couldn't be considered handsome, but he gave off a calm and wise feeling. However, his eyes seemed a little hazy, which made people feel a little uncomfortable when they looked at him. This was the first impression Yang Chun gave people. Sitting on the main seat, Yang Chun looked at the 2 elders and asked softly, "Xiao Chun has returned from the Heavenly Policy Hall?" "That's right. He just returned to the Sword Sect today." One of the elders nodded and replied truthfully. Xiao Chun's return to the Sword Sect was immediately reported to the Heavenly Sect, and Yang Chun found out. Hearing that Xiao Chun had returned to the Sword Sect, a cold light flashed through Yang Chun's eyes. At the same time, the battle intent in his heart slowly rose. As the new sect master of the Heavenly Sect, Yang Chun's greatest dream was to destroy the Sword Sect and accomplish what his master, Tao Ming, failed to do. As a result, Yang Chun had always viewed Xiao Chun as his opponent. Now, the person he had always viewed as his opponent had finally returned. Unable to hide the battle intent in his heart, Yang Chun sneered, "Xiao Chun, I won't be like my master. This time, I will destroy the Sword Sect completely." With that, Yang Chun looked at the 2 elders and said calmly, "It's time to take action. Remember, it has to be fast and leave no one alive." "Yes." Hearing this, the 2 elders respectfully nodded in acknowledgement. They had no idea what Yang Chun was talking about, but it was clearly targeted at the Sword Sect. In the world of great battles, Xiao Chun had met his first opponent, and that was Yang Chun. As the new sect master of the Heavenly Sect, Yang Chun had his own grand ambitions. He wanted to bring the Heavenly Sect to greater heights. To do that, he first had to deal with the Sword Sect. The Sword Sect could be said to be the Heavenly Sect and Tao Ming. It had always been like a thorn in his throat, and Yang Chun wanted to be the one to pull it out. After receiving the order, the 2 elders quickly left and began to carry out Yang Chun's orders in secret. The Heavenly Sect continued to move, while the Sword Sect also reacted as soon as Xiao Chun returned. Within the Jian province, numerous disciples of the Sword Sect were dispatched. They scattered throughout the Jian province and began to hunt down the spies sent by the Heavenly Sect. In almost every city in the Jian province, there was a massacre every day. The 2 sides of the massacre were the disciples of the Sword Sect and the spies of the Heavenly Sect. Perhaps the shopkeeper of an inconspicuous shop looked no different, but he was actually a spy of the Heavenly Sect. Once discovered, the disciples of the Sword Sect would mercilessly kill him. Sect Master Xiao Chun had personally given the order to kill the spies of the Heavenly Sect. The disciples of the Sword Sect naturally did not dare to slack off. Moreover, everyone in the Sword Sect hated the Heavenly Sect to the core. The enmity between the 2 sects had long been impossible to resolve, so once they encountered each other, there would definitely be a great battle. East City was a large city within the Jian province. At this moment, several higher-ups of the He family, the #1 clan in East City, had gathered together. One of them looked at the patriarch of the He family, who sat on the main seat. "Patriarch, East City is in complete chaos. In just 3 days, the Sword Sect has killed over 1,000 people, causing everyone in the city to panic. Should we step in and stop them?" The He family was the overlord of East City. They were also a subordinate force that had always followed the Sword Sect. They could be said to be loyal to the Sword Sect, so Xiao Chun treated the He family well. He directly made the He family an overlord in East City. Due to the Sword Sect's massacre of the spies of the Heavenly Sect, East City was indeed in chaos. However, the patriarch of the He family refused without hesitation. "Nonsense. The order to kill the spies of the Heavenly Sect was personally given by the sect master. What does it mean for our He family to step in and stop them? Do you want me to go against the sect master's wishes?" How could the He family stop an order personally given by Xiao Chun? Not only could they not stop it, but they also had to cooperate unconditionally. All this while, there were many orders from Sword's Gate. Some were from the Vice Headmaster, some were from the Sword Head, and some were from the Sword Head. With regards to these orders, The He family could send a message to Sword's Gate to explain the reasons behind them and mediate between the two parties. However, the He family clearly could not object to an order personally given by Shao Chun. Moreover, this matter was related to the heavenly sect. If the He family dared to speak carelessly at this moment, they would definitely be courting death, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 21-29. In the face of an order personally issued by Shao Chun, the He clan naturally did not dare to have the slightest objection. After being reprimanded by the head of the He clan, the senior member of the He clan also shut his mouth and did not dare to say anything more. However, when no one was paying attention, a cold glint flashed across the eyes of the He clan member. Unfortunately, no one present and the people of the He clan noticed it. As for the matter of East City, there wasn't much to worry about. The so-called panic was a little exaggerated. After all, the disciples of the Sword Sect had never made life difficult for the commoners. They had always been targeting the spies of the Hetien sect. Therefore, the situation in East City was quite stable. The He family naturally did their best to cooperate with the disciples of the Sword Sect to capture the spies of the Hetien sect. However, when night fell, a black-clothed man silently left the He family residence, quickly disappearing into the night. This black-clothed man left the He family residence, so it was obvious that he was a member of the He family. Moreover, looking at his comprehension realm cultivation, his status in the He family shouldn't be low. At the very least, he should be an elder. No one noticed the tracks of this black-clothed man. Very quickly, in a residence in the northeast corner of East City, this black-clothed man pushed open the door and entered. Using the weak light in the room, this person was the elder who had persuaded the He family head to stop the Sword Sect. His name was He Xin, and he could be considered an important person in the He family. However, for He Xin to sneak here in the middle of the night, no one expected that when He Xin arrived, several black-clothed men would appear in the originally empty room. Moreover, their cultivation had all reached the End Realm. A total of 5 End Realm experts descended in East City, and these 5 people definitely weren't from the Sword Sect. With so many End Realm experts appearing here, it was enough to show that things weren't simple. Facing the 5 people in front of him, He Xin respectfully cupped his hands and bowed. Hetien sect disciple greets elder. He Xin actually claimed to be a disciple of the Heavenly Gate. Hearing this, one of the 5 people faintly nodded and said, "How are the arrangements?" "Elder, don't worry. Everything has been arranged. However, there will be some trouble with the Sword Sect." Hearing this, He Xin respectfully replied. Hearing He Xin's words, the Heavenly Sect elder didn't seem to care too much and said, "It's fine. We just need to delay for a cup of tea's time." They needed to be on guard against the Sword Sect, but these 5 elders didn't seem to care too much. He still didn't know what the Coiling Heaven Sect's plan was, but from all the signs, their target shouldn't be the Sword Sect because from start to finish, the Coiling Heaven Sect didn't seem to have any intention of targeting the Sword Sect. Yang Chen's target wasn't the Sword Sect, and he didn't want to start a war with the Sword Sect. So what was Yang Chen's goal? For the time being, they didn't receive any accurate information, but at this moment, the Coiling Heaven Sect had already begun their operation. After instructing He Xin for some time, the 5 Heavenly Combining Gate elders ordered He Xin to leave. After He Xin left, the 5 of them looked at each other before opening their mouths one after another. "It's about time, let's do it." Prepare to attack. East City had already become extremely quiet at night. Not many people could be seen on the streets. At this moment, 5 black figures appeared in the sky above the He clan's courtyard. A moment later, a frightening aftershock was suddenly emitted from the sky above the He clan's mansion. At the same time, more than half of the He clan's mansion was destroyed in an instant. Someone was attacking the He family residence, and the person who attacked wasn't weak. He was extremely strong. Being attacked, the He family reacted right away. Under the lead of the He family head, a group of He family experts appeared and arrived in front of the 5 black-clothed men. The He family head had a Tao realm cultivation, but when he faced the 5 black-clothed men, his expression was extremely solemn. End realm experts. The 5 black-clothed men that appeared in front of him were all end realm experts. 5 black-clothed men appearing in the He family was definitely a calamity. Moreover, the He family head still didn't know the identities of the 5 of them. Facing 5 end realm experts, the He family didn't have any ability to fight back. As such, the He family head could only stall for time. Seniors, what is the meaning of this? How did my He family offend you? Don't waste your time. The He family will be destroyed today. The Sword Sect won't be able to save you. One of the Coiling Heaven Sect elders saw through the He family head's intentions and said, the 5 of them were the 5 Coiling Heaven Sect elders that He Xin met before. At this moment, they suddenly attacked the He family, which was completely out of the Sword Sect's expectations. The expression of the head of the He clan became increasingly ugly when his thoughts were seen through with a glance. However, this time around, the head of the He clan did not have the opportunity to speak. The 5 elders of the Heavenly Gate immediately attacked again and began to destroy the He clan. Moreover, during the process, what the He family members didn't expect was that He Xin, who was an elder of the He family, would suddenly turn against them and kill his own family members. He Xin, you're crazy. Sensing He Xin's actions, several elders of the He family shouted in anger. Hearing their angry shouts, He Xin coldly smiled and replied, I'm not crazy. I'm a member of the Coiling Heaven Sect. The sect leader has orders, so I'm just following orders. He Xin was a member of the Coiling Heaven Sect. Hearing this, everyone in the He family felt as if thunder had exploded in their heads. As one of the elders of the He family, He Xin was actually a spy of the He family. What was laughable was that during the investigation of the Sword Sect, everyone in the He family swore that everyone in the He family was loyal to the Sword Sect. Looking at it now, it was simply a joke. Even the elders of the family had joined the Coiling Heaven Sect, yet the He family dared to say that they didn't have a single spy of the Coiling Heaven Sect. They didn't expect that there would be a traitor in the family, and one who held a high position. This made everyone in the He family furious, but there was nothing they could do. Looking at their family members being killed one by one, as well as the unstoppable aura of the 5 Coiling Heaven Sect elders, the He family members were filled with despair. It was impossible to block the attacks of 5 End Realm experts. However, when the battle erupted, the disciples of the Sword Sect who were in E City rushed over. Unfortunately, the strongest among them was only a Comprehension Realm elder. With such strength, he wasn't a match for the 5 Coiling Heaven Sect elders. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2130. Facing the disciples of the Sword Sect, one of the 5 elders of the Heavenly Sect sneered, "Reckless fools." Immediately after, he directly attacked the disciples of the Sword Sect. Facing the disciples of the Sword Sect, one of the 5 elders of the Heavenly Sect sneered, "Reckless fools." Immediately after, he directly attacked the disciples of the Sword Sect. They never expected that 5 elders of the Heavenly Sect would appear in E City. As a result, E City's strength alone was unable to withstand them. The battle started suddenly and ended quickly as well. The He clan did not have the slightest ability to resist and was directly annihilated. The disciples of the Sword's Gate were also all killed. In less than a quarter of an hour, the He clan was annihilated, and the 5 elders of the Coiling Heaven Sect quickly disappeared into the night. However, before they left, the 5 of them left behind a sentence on the broken walls of the He clan's mansion. "This is only the beginning." Such threatening words were indeed infuriating. The incident in E City quickly spread to the Sword Sect. In the Sword Sect, Song Xing, who was cultivating, was suddenly awakened by a knock on the door. An elder of the Sword Sect hurriedly ran in and reported, "Vice Sect Master, bad news. Something happened in E City." The elder did not dare to delay the matter in E City and immediately reported it to Song Xing. When he heard that 5 elders of the Heavenly Sect had appeared in E City, Song Xing's face instantly darkened. Although the location of East City could not be said to be the central region of the Sword Province, it was also not the border region. However, even so, it was actually infiltrated by the 5 Heavenly Coiling School's elders. Song Xing was infuriated by such an incident. Moreover, Song Xing did not expect that the He clan would be directly destroyed. Song Xing knew about the He clan in East City. After all, this was a large clan that had always followed the Sword Sect. It could be said that they were loyal and devoted to the Sword Sect. Now that they were destroyed, it was undoubtedly a slap to the face of the Sword Sect. Without wasting any time, Song Xing quickly contacted Nangong Guan, Lin Qing, and Li Ku after hearing about what had happened in East City. The 4 of them quickly rushed to East City through the teleportation array. 2 hours later, Song Xing and the other 3 arrived. However, the 5 elders of the Heavenly Gate had already disappeared without a trace, not leaving behind a single trace. Standing in the sky with gloomy expressions, Song Xing and the other 3 looked at the scene in front of them. The He clan was in ruins, and the words left behind by the Heavenly Sect made their expressions extremely ugly. Xiao Chun had just given the order to kill the spies of the Heavenly Sect, but the Heavenly Sect had directly destroyed the He clan. This was clearly a slap to the face of the Sword Sect. After a moment of silence, Nangong Guan finally said in a deep voice, "Is the new sect master of the Heavenly Sect trying to intimidate us?" The Heavenly Sect's target was not the Sword Sect, but the He clan that was loyal to the Sword Sect. They were one of the Sword Sect's subordinate forces. Although their actions could not directly cause the Sword Sect great losses, it would undoubtedly cause the Sword Sect to lose face. Thinking about it, as a subordinate force of the Sword Sect, they were directly destroyed by the Heavenly Sect. Wasn't this embarrassing for the Sword Sect? If they couldn't even protect their own subordinate forces, what would the other subordinate forces of the Sword Sect think if this kind of thing happened a few more times? Every year, they would hand over a large amount of cultivation resources to the Sword Sect, but in the end, they did not receive the protection of the Sword Sect. This would indeed cause them to be bitterly disappointed, and at the same time, they would become a joke to the other forces. Following Nangong Guan's words, Song Xing said with a cold expression, "I'll report this matter to the sect master first." Now that the matter had happened, they could only wait and see how Xiao Chun would deal with it. From the Heavenly Sect's actions, Yang Chun had indeed taken Xiao Chun down a notch. At the same time, he had thoroughly expressed his hostility towards the Sword Sect. Song Xing's group of 4 continued to stay in East City to investigate. As for Xiao Chun, who was in the Sword Sect, he quickly received a message from Song Xing and learned of what had happened in East City. It had only been a few days since he returned to the Sword Sect, and this kind of thing had happened. Moreover, it was not too early or too late. Yang Chun had chosen to make his move after he returned to the Sword Sect. He had waited until he returned to the Sword Sect before making his move. This was clearly aimed at him. Moreover, from the series of events that had happened before, it was clear that Yang Chun had been preparing for this for a long time. Sitting upright in the clouds, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with a cold light. Qin Shu and the other women beside him asked worriedly, "Husband, are you all right?" The women also knew what had happened in East City, so they had been accompanying Xiao Chun. When he heard their questions, Xiao Chun shook his head slightly and said, "I'm fine." The incident in East City had indeed made Xiao Chun a little angry. However, this alone was not enough to do anything to the Sword Sect. It was nothing more than making him feel disgusted or sending him a letter of challenge. Indeed, the Heavenly Sect's actions could be seen as a letter of challenge from Yang Chun to Xiao Chun. However, this letter of challenge was a little too much. At the same time, what Xiao Chun did not have time to react was that the incident in East City was only the beginning. Not long after Xiao Chun received the letter from Song Xing, the other 3 cities near the border of the Sword Province were also attacked by the Heavenly Sect. The clans and forces in the cities that were affiliated with the Sword Sect were directly annihilated. News of the attacks continued to reach Xiao Chun. At this point in time, 5 cities in the Sword Province had been attacked by the Heavenly Sect. The Heavenly Sect's target was very clear. They were targeting the forces affiliated with the sword sect. They acted quickly and decisively. Moreover, they came and went without a trace. Obviously, the heavenly sect had even planned their escape route before they attacked. Therefore, when the experts from the sword sect arrived, the heavenly sect had already disappeared without a trace. In just one night, 5 cities were ambushed, and 6 of Swords Gate's subordinate forces were annihilated. Xiao Chun was enraged by the events that had unfolded before his very eyes. The heavenly sect's actions, or rather Yang Chen's actions, did not have much effect on the sword sect. However, the region was very disgusting. Moreover, the heavenly sect would leave behind some provocative words for the forces affiliated with the sword sect. This was obviously a provocation to Xiao Chun. After a night of silence, in the end, 5 cities in the Sword Province were attacked, and 6 forces affiliated with the sword sect were annihilated by the heavenly sect. Sitting in the courtyard with Qin Shiru and the other girls by his side, Xiao Chen's eyes were extremely cold. He looked in the direction of the heavenly sect and gradually revealed a cold smile. Yang Chun, since you want to play, I'll play with you. Xiao Chun had already received Yang Chen's letter of challenge. The next step was to see how Xiao Chun would respond. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 21-31. In just one night, 5 cities in the Sword Province were attacked by the Katian sect, and 6 of the Sword sect's subordinate forces were annihilated. Among them, the He family was the most infuriating. After all, the He family was one of the earliest subordinate forces to follow the sword sect. After a night of dealing with the situation, Song Xing and the others returned to the sword sect one after another. However, the sword sect sent out several powerful experts to investigate the Katian sect's whereabouts in various places in the Sword Province. However, Xiao Chun did not have much hope for this. Judging from the situation last night, the attack this time was obviously prepared by the Katian sect. Now, the people of the Katian sect had probably already left the Sword Province. In the main hall of the Sword sect, Xiao Chun, Song Xing, and the other deputy sect leaders gathered. After last night's incident, everyone's expression was incomparably cold, and they were furious, because the Katian sect's actions were undoubtedly a blatant provocation. They didn't attack the sword sect directly, but attacked the subordinate forces instead. If this wasn't a provocation, then what was it? The sword sect definitely had to respond to such a provocation. However, it was up to Xiao Chun to decide how to retaliate. After all, Xiao Chun was the sect leader of the sword sect. Song Xing and the others shifted their gazes to Xiao Chun. Facing their gazes, Xiao Chun revealed a faint smile and said, "Since they have issued a challenge, we naturally have to respond." In the face of the Katian sect's provocation, the sword sect definitely couldn't choose to remain silent. If not, wouldn't they become a laughingstock in the Great Thousand World? They definitely had to respond. But at this point, Xiao Chun paused, swept a glance at everyone present, and continued. "Since Yang Chan wants to play with me, my sword sect will naturally accompany him to the end." Xiao Chun had already decided to counterattack. On the other side, within the heavenly gate of the Tianzhou, Yang Chun had also received the report of last night's operation. Everything went smoothly, according to the plan, and there were no mistakes. Listening to the elder's report, Yang Chen's lips curled into a faint smile. He then looked at the sky, in the direction of Swords Gate, and softly murmured, "Let's go, Swords Gate." "All right, Xiao Chun, how will you fight back?" Yang Chen knew that Xiao Chun would definitely not take this lying down and would definitely retaliate. Regarding this, Yang Chun had already prepared for it. He had already made preparations for all the major cities in Tianzhou, as well as the various subordinate forces of the Hetian sect. After all, Yang Chun had ordered the experts of the Hetian sect to launch a sneak attack on 5 cities in the Sword Province and wipe out the affiliated forces of the 6 major sword sections. The most likely way for Xiao Chun to retaliate was to give Yang Chun a taste of his own medicine by attacking the affiliated forces of the Hetian sect. Therefore, Yang Chun had been prepared for this. The letter of challenge had already been issued. Now, All that was left was to wait for Xiao Qin's response. This was also the first time Yang Chun and Xiao Qin had fought. Based on the current situation, Yang Qin clearly had the upper hand and even had a slight advantage. This was because as long as Xiao Qin dared to give him a taste of his own medicine and attack the subordinate forces of the He-Tian sect, Yang Qin was confident that he could make the sword sect suffer a small loss again. Having already prepared for this, Yang Qin's battle intent continued to rise. Yang Qin was waiting for Xiao Qin's counterattack. However, 3 days had passed, and the sword sect did not make any moves. He had already waited for 3 days, but the sword sect did not make any moves at all. This made Yang Qin very suspicious. Could it be that Xiao Qin had endured this? But that was obviously impossible. Yang Qin understood Xiao Qin and felt that with Xiao Qin's personality, he was not someone who could endure this kind of humiliation. Before he became the sect master of the He-Tian sect, Yang Qin had a detailed understanding of Xiao Qin. He knew that Xiao Qin was not someone who would endure this kind of humiliation. It could even be said that Xiao Qin had a vengeful personality. All along, as long as someone provoked Xiao Qin and the sword sect, Xiao Qin would not remain indifferent. This was the case when the sword sect was still very weak. Now, as the sword sect continued to grow stronger, logically speaking, Xiao Qin would not be able to endure this. He had always felt that Xiao Qin would definitely make a counterattack. However, until now, Xiao Qin had not made any moves, and the sword sect had not made any moves. This made Yang Qin somewhat suspicious. Every day, he paid close attention to the sword sect's every move. At the same time, he was also on guard. He was constantly paying attention to the sword sect's people entering Tianzhou. However, 3 days had passed, and he had not made any moves. A trace of confusion flashed through Yang Qin's eyes as he sat in the garden. At this moment, Yang Qin was indeed somewhat suspicious of what Xiao Qin was trying to do. Even Yang Qin did not believe that Xiao Qin would not respond, because Xiao Qin was not the kind of person who would not retaliate after being hit. However, the most important question right now was how Xiao Qin would retaliate. This was the question that Yang Qin was most concerned about. Yang Qin was filled with doubts. However, these doubts did not last long. Very soon, Xiao Qin gave him an answer. The next day, which was the 4th day since the He-Tian sect had launched a sneak attack on the 5 cities of the Jian province, Xiao Qin's counterattack finally came. Yang Qin, who had just finished a night of cultivation, did not even have the time to wash up before an elder of the He-Tian sect hurriedly came to find him. The elder did not even have time to reply to Yang Qin before he hurriedly spoke. "Sect Master, something bad has happened." Upon hearing the elder's words and seeing how anxious he was, Yang Qin appeared to be much calmer. "What's the hurry? Speak slowly." Hearing Yang Qin's words, the elder took a deep breath and told Yang Qin what had happened last night. The elder said with an ice-cold expression, "Last night, we headed to the Dan Valley. The people from the Talisman sect and Weapon sect were ambushed by the people from the Sword sect on their way back. The escorts were all killed, and the items were all stolen. Also, what else is there? Speak." Yang Qin's expression darkened when he heard the elder's words. Facing Yang Qin's questioning, the elder continued to speak nervously. "Also, just a moment ago, the Sword sect announced to the public that anyone who can provide the whereabouts of the Heavenly Sect disciples outside of the Tianzhou region will be rewarded with 10,000 high-grade spirit stones. It's here. Xiao Qin's counterattack is finally here." Hearing this, Yang Qin's eyes flashed with a cold glint. For the past 4 days, Yang Qin had been waiting for Xiao Qin's counterattack. Now it was finally here. However, Yang Qin did not expect Xiao Qin's target at all. Xiao Qin did not launch a sneak attack on any cities in the Tianzhou region. Instead, he targeted the Heavenly Sect disciples outside of the Tianzhou region. These people were outside of the Tianzhou region, and the Heavenly Sect could not fully protect them. Therefore, it was much easier for the Sword Sect to kill them. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2132. As one of the 10 great Ling Tian sects, the heavenly sect had many disciples. Naturally, it was impossible for all of them to stay in the sect. As one of the 10 great Ling Tian sects, the heavenly sect had many disciples. Naturally, it was impossible for all of them to stay in the sect. Many of the disciples were either out on missions or training. It could be said that the heavenly sect's disciples could be found in almost every province in the Great Thousand World. Now that these disciples were out, they had become Xiao Qian's targets. Moreover, the most troublesome thing for Yang Chun was that it was very difficult to protect these disciples. It was impossible to take care of all of them. Moreover, the caravans that the heavenly sect had sent to the Dan Valley, the armament sect, and the talisman sect had also been robbed by the sword sect. Although the loss was not too great, it still made Yang Chun furious. Yang Chun's eyes flickered with a cold light as he said coldly, "Xiao Chun, I have underestimated you. However, this is what makes it interesting. If you are too weak, then it will be boring for me to play with you." Xiao Qian's counterattack was out of Yang Chun's expectations. At this time, the only thing Yang Chun could do was to urgently summon the scattered disciples of the heavenly sect back. As for how many of them could return safely, it was up to fate. As for using the same method to deal with the sword sect, it was impossible now, because in these 3 days, Xiao Chun had already summoned all the disciples of the sword sect back to the sword sect. The reason why Xiao Chun had to wait 3 days before taking action was because he wanted all the disciples of the sword sect to return safely. Therefore, it was delayed for 3 days. Unfortunately, Yang Chun did not expect this at all during these 3 days, so he did not make any response. At this time, it was impossible to besiege and kill the disciples of the sword sect. As for directly attacking the sword sect, Yang Chun did not have such thoughts for the time being, because no matter if it was the sword sect or the heavenly sect, they were not ready to fight again. The conflict this time was entirely because of Yang Chun's demonstration against the sword sect. He could only order the disciples of the heavenly sect outside to return as soon as possible. After giving the order, Yang Chun looked in the direction of the sword province and muttered coldly, "Xiao Chun, let's wait and see." Yang Chun could already guess that the disciples of the heavenly sect outside would suffer heavy casualties this time. However, Yang Chun could not stop this because he could not send too many people to protect the disciples outside. Otherwise, the headquarters of the heavenly sect would be empty. At that time, it would give Xiao Chun an opportunity to attack headquarters. Empty headquarters would give Xiao Chun an opportunity. He made a decision immediately. He would rather give up on the disciples who were training or doing missions outside to ensure the safety of the heavenly sect headquarters. The news had already been sent out by the sword sect, and soon, news about the disciples of the heavenly sect was also sent back to the sword sect. The sword sect did not go back on their word to the people or forces who provided the information. Once the information was verified to be accurate, they would pay 10,000 high-grade spirit stones. One after another, the whereabouts of the Katian sect disciples were exposed to the eyes of the Sword's Gate. At the same time, the many experts of the Sword's Gate, who had long been prepared, moved out one after another and began to ambush the Katian sect disciples who were out to fight. Normally, no one would dare to provoke the disciples of the heavenly sect when they were outside alone or in groups of 3 to 5. However, they were powerless against the attacks of the sword sect. Without the protection of the sect, the disciples of the heavenly sect were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered in the face of the experts of the sword sect. In just one day, more than 100 disciples of the heavenly sect were killed. The news was sent back to the heavenly sect. In the cave, Xiao Chun, Song Xing, and the others were sitting together and drinking wine. Lika said with a smile, "Awesome. Let's see what the new sect leader of the heavenly sect will do. Now that we have the whereabouts of thousands of disciples of the heavenly sect, if he doesn't send reinforcements, none of them will be able to escape." Previously, when the heavenly sect launched a sneak attack on 5 cities, Li Ku and the others were all furious. Now, it was finally time for the sword sect to counterattack. To be honest, when Xiao Chun first announced this plan, even Song Xing and the others did not expect it at all. This was because Xiao Chun did not set the target within Tianzhou, but outside of Tianzhou. However, judging from the current situation, Xiao Qin's plan was obviously successful. Yang Chun was not prepared at all. Now, it was up to Yang Chun to make his own choice. This was only the first step of Xiao Qin's plan. The second step would depend on how Yang Chun dealt with it. If Yang Chun sent too many experts to protect the disciples outside, then Xiao Chun would lead the experts of the Sword Sect and directly attack the headquarters of the Heavenly Sect. He did not want to destroy the Heavenly Sect in one fell swoop, but at least he wanted to make the Heavenly Sect lose face. After all, his own headquarters had been attacked by others. This was obviously not a glorious thing. Moreover, the losses would definitely not be small. They were waiting for Yang Chun's decision. Unfortunately, Yang Chun did not take the bait. Just as Xiao Chun and the others gathered together and waited for the Heavenly Sect's response, a sword head hurriedly walked in and bowed respectfully to Xiao Chun. Sect leader, the Heavenly Sect has not made any moves for the time being. They have not sent anyone to receive the disciples. An entire day had passed since the Sword Sect took action, but there was still no response from the Heavenly Sect. Yang Chun also did not send any experts to receive the disciples. Hearing the Sword Head's report, Song Xing and the others could not help but feel a little disappointed. Because of this, Xiao Qin's plan to attack the Heavenly Sect's headquarters would be completely ruined. However, Xiao Chun smiled at this time. He was not discouraged at all. Instead, he said indifferently, "It's reasonable. If Yang Chun can't even see through this, then there's no point." Xiao Chun seemed to have known that Yang Chun would see through his plan. Therefore, when the second step of the plan failed, Xiao Chun did not take it to heart. After saying this, Xiao Chun looked at the sword head and said, "Pass down the order. Kill all the Heavenly Sect disciples on the list. Don't let any of them return to Tianzhou." Since Yang Chun did not take the bait, they could only stop while they were ahead. Killing some of his disciples was not a loss. Hearing Xiao Qin's words, the sword head respectfully nodded and left the courtyard. Not long after this sword head left, another sword head hurriedly ran in. His face had a hint of excitement, and he even forgot to salute Xiao Chun as he hurriedly said, "Sect leader, we caught a big fish." The leader of the swordsmen had indeed been a little rude, but Xiao Chun didn't care too much about it. On the contrary, he was more curious about the big fish that the leader of the swordsmen had mentioned. With a smile on his face, Xiao Chun asked, "Why are you so excited?" "Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of chapter. Chapter 2133. Yang Chun didn't fall for Xiao Qin's counterattack. With that, the second step of Xiao Qin's plan to sneak attack the Heavenly Sect naturally fell through. Yang Chun obviously thought about this point, which was why he didn't send out the experts of the Heavenly Sect. It was to prevent Xiao Chun from sneak attacking. Without the opportunity to launch a sneak attack on the Katian Sect, Xiao Chun could only target the disciples of the Katian Sect who were currently outside. Although this would not affect the Katian Sect too much, it was still better than nothing. They had already given up on the second step of the plan, but who would have thought that the swordhead would actually give Xiao Chun such a surprise? Facing Xiao Chun's question, the swordhead still couldn't hide his excitement as he said, "Sect leader, there's reliable news that the Heavenly Sect has an End Realm Elder who is in Dao Province." Dao Province, which was where Taiqing Temple was. When they heard this, Xiao Chun, Song Xing, Lin Qing, Li Ku, and the others were all stunned. Then they all laughed out loud. He originally thought that there would only be some small fish and shrimps in the net this time. But who would have thought that there would actually be a big fish? Forcefully suppressing the excitement in his heart, Xiao Chun looked at the sword head and asked, "Is the news reliable?" "It has been confirmed. It is definitely reliable." Hearing this, the sword head nodded his head. The news had already been confirmed, and according to the sword head, it was a coincidence that the elder from the Heavenly Sect was in the Dao Province. Moreover, he was alone at the moment, and there were no other experts from the Heavenly Sect around him. A lone End Realm expert. With that, it would be easy for the Sword Sect to surround and kill him. After all, although an End Realm expert was strong, If he faced 3 deputy sect leaders of the Sword Sect, the outcome was obvious. Killing an End Realm Elder was a huge blow to Heaven Joining Sect. After all, even Heaven Joining Sect didn't have many End Realm experts. Killing one meant that they had one less. Excited, Xiao Chun quickly made arrangements. He immediately said to Wu Huan, Zhou Song, and Lin Qing, "The 3 of you will go to the Dao province." At the same time, they sent out 3 deputy sect elders to not give this Hetian sect elder any chance. With 3 End Realm experts attacking one person, it was pretty much impossible for them to fail, unless that Hetian sect elder had some precious life-saving treasure. However, the chances of that weren't high. When they heard Xiao Chen's words, Wu Huan, Zhou Song, and Lin Qing all nodded in agreement. Then, the 3 of them immediately set off towards the Dao province. On the side of the Sword Sect, they received this unexpected surprise and found out where this Hetian sect elder was. On the other side, within the Hetian sect, Yang Chun also found out about this news. At this moment, within the main hall of the Hetian sect, Yang Chun sat on the main seat. His face was dark and sunken as he looked at an old man below. Why is Qian Feng in the Dao province? When did he leave the sect? Why didn't I know? Yang Chun didn't know that Qian Feng was in the Dao prefecture. Only now did he know that Qian Feng wasn't in the Heavenly Gate, but in the Dao prefecture all by himself because of the counterattack of the Sword Gate. When he heard Yang Chen's words and looked at the sunken Yang Chun, the old man said with an ugly expression, "Sect leader, please calm down. Qian Feng went to the Dao province because of his concubine's father's birthday." Qian Feng was an elder of the Hetian sect and an End Realm expert. There was no need to talk about his status. Moreover, because Qian Feng was lustful, he had many women around him, including all his wives and concubines. There were at least 10 of them. When he heard that Qian Feng went to the Dao province to celebrate his concubine's father's birthday, the rage in Yang Chen's eyes burned brighter and brighter. In front of the old man, Yang Chen couldn't help but scold him. "This idiot! What time is it now? He actually went to the Dao province alone for a woman. He is simply asking for death." In Yang Chen's eyes, Qian Feng was just an idiot. Moreover, he was extremely stupid to go to the Dao province alone. Yang Chun didn't even need to think to know how dangerous Qian Feng's current situation was. Knowing that Yang Chun was in a rage, the old man tried to calm him down. "Sect leader, please calm down. I have already sent a message to Qian Feng. I believe that he will immediately leave the Dao province and return to the sect." Both Yang Chun and the old man knew that the Sword Sect was trying to kill the Hetian sect disciples outside. However, Yang Chun snorted coldly after hearing the old man's words. "Umph, do you really think that Qian Feng can return?" Yang Chun didn't think that Qian Feng could return because as long as Xiao Chen knew about this, there was no need to say what would happen to Qian Feng. Xiao Chen definitely wouldn't let go of such a heaven-sent opportunity. He didn't think that the chances of Qian Feng coming back alive were high, unless Xiao Chun still didn't know about Qian Feng's situation. If that was the case, Qian Feng still had a chance to escape. However, this chance was too slim. The Sword Sect definitely knew about Qian Feng's situation. Moreover, the Dao province was far away from Tianzhou. Even if Yang Chun sent people over to help, they wouldn't be able to make it in time. Therefore, Yang Chun couldn't help Qian Feng. The rage in his eyes slowly faded. Since things had reached such a stage, there was no point in getting angry. Yang Chun could only curse in his heart. "Idiot, you are asking for death." While cursing in his heart, Yang Chun said, "Inform Qian Feng to leave the Dao province and head to the Min province. When the time comes, you will go receive him." The Min province was in the middle of the Dao province and Tianzhou. As long as Qian Feng could reach there, Yang Chun would be able to send people to save him. Facing an End Realm Elder, Yang Chun couldn't just watch him die. However, he was in the Dao province and couldn't do anything. Everything depended on whether or not Qian Feng could reach the Min province safely. Hearing Yang Chen's words, the old man respectfully nodded his head. Yang Chun placed all his hopes on whether or not Xiao Chen's reaction would be slower and give Qian Feng time to leave the Dao province and rush to the Min province. Only then could Yang Chun save Qianfeng. Unfortunately, Yang Chen's hopes were destined to be destroyed. Just as he was thinking about how to save Qianfeng, Wu Huan, Zhou Song, and Lin Xing were rushing towards the Dao province. With the sword sect's movement speed, before Qianfeng left the Dao province, Zhou Song and the other two would probably kill him. It would be really difficult to leave the Dao province and head to the Min province. He didn't know that the sword sect would move so quickly, but Yang Chun had no choice. He could only choose to do this. Apart from that, there was no other way. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of this chapter. Chapter 2134. Yang Chun told Qianfeng to rush to Min province as soon as possible, but unfortunately, he was still one step behind. Dao province, by Qing City. Qianfeng was currently in the Lin family inn by Qing City. Originally, because of Qianfeng's arrival, the Lin family was in full swing. Everyone wanted to establish a relationship with Qianfeng. However, at this moment, the Lin family's main hall was no longer as lively as it was a few days ago. Only Qianfeng and a few members of the Lin family were sitting together, and everyone had a gloomy expression on their faces. Just now, Qianfeng received a message for the Katian sect, telling him to rush to Min province immediately or his life would be in danger. After hearing the message from the sect, Qianfeng, who had been talking cheerfully a moment ago, naturally knew what had happened. Qianfeng also knew that the Sword Gate had besieged and killed the Heavenly Sect disciples outside. However, what Qianfeng didn't expect, or rather, what caught him off guard, was that the Sword Sect actually targeted him. Usually, Qianfeng relied on his status as an elder of the Katian sect and his cultivation base to rarely put anyone in his eyes. However, facing the threat from the Sword Sect, Qianfeng didn't dare to be careless at all. This was because the Sword Sect didn't care about his status as an elder of the Katian sect at all. It could even be said that because Qianfeng was an elder of the Katian sect, the Sword Sect wanted to kill him. With the tense relationship between the Sword Sect and the Katian sect, Qianfeng knew very well that Xiao Chun would definitely not let go of such an opportunity. As long as Xiao Chun knew his whereabouts, Xiao Chun would definitely send people to kill him. Therefore, after receiving the message from the sect, Qianfeng immediately made preparations to evacuate. Sitting on the main seat, Qianfeng glanced at the members of the Lin family and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, this old man will leave immediately." At this moment of life and death, Qianfeng couldn't care about his concubine. Naturally, he couldn't take her with him. He could only leave her in the Lin family and rush to Min province alone. This would be faster. Hearing Qianfeng's words, the members of the Lin family looked at each other. Then, the ancestor of the Lin family said, "Elder, you don't have to worry about us. Just leave as soon as possible." Everyone in the Lin family knew why Qianfeng was in such a hurry to leave. It was because the threat of the Sword Sect was right in front of them. No one knew when the Sword Sect would appear. If Qianfeng was blocked by the Sword Sect, then he would be in danger. After a few simple words of farewell, Qianfeng prepared to leave. But at this time, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Lin Xing's figures tore through the void and slowly appeared above by Qing City. The three of them didn't hide their whereabouts and sped all the way from the Sword Sect. According to the intelligence, Qianfeng was now in the Lin family of Evergreen City. When the three of them appeared, a terrifying aura instantly descended from the sky. When Qianfeng, who was in the Lin family's courtyard and was about to leave, felt this aura, his expression immediately changed. 3 end realm powerhouses, and these 3 people were definitely not from the Katian sect. When Qianfeng felt the aura of Zhou Song and the other 2, his expression was extremely ugly. He didn't expect the people from the Sword Sect to come so quickly and arrive so quickly. Not only did Qianfeng's face turn pale, but the other members of the Lin clan were also terrified. In the eyes of the Lin clan, the Sword's Gate was a colossal existence. They could easily crush the entire Lin clan with a flick of their fingers. They had never thought of fighting with the Sword Sect because it was simply unrealistic. They wanted to run, but now they couldn't. Just as Qianfeng noticed the appearance of Zhou Song and the other two, the city lord of Baiqing City also flew up from the city lord manor. He came in front of Zhou Song and the other two and bowed respectfully. "Three seniors, I'm the city lord of Baiqing City. May I ask why seniors have come to Baiqing City?" The city lord of Baiqing City was also from the Taiqing Temple, but at this moment, in front of Zhou Song and the other two, he didn't dare to be disrespectful. At the same time, he didn't dare to have the slightest complaint about Zhou Song and the other two publicly breaking the rules of Baiqing City. Hearing the words of the city lord of Baiqing City, Wu Huan said lightly, "The matters of the sword sect have nothing to do with you, Baiqing City." He took the initiative to reveal his identity. Hearing this, the city lord of Baiqing City swallowed the words that were about to come out of his mouth. He stood obediently beside Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Lin Qing. The city lord of Baiqing City didn't dare to take another look. At this moment, Zhou Song also sensed Qianfeng's aura. He looked directly in the direction of the Lin family, and the corners of his mouth curled into a faint smile. Found him. In the entire Baiqing City, there was only one end realm expert, Qianfeng. It wasn't difficult to find him. As his voice fell, Zhou Song took a step forward and appeared in the sky above the Lin family. At the same time, Wu Huan and Lin Qing followed closely behind. The three of them quickly appeared in front of Qianfeng and the Lin family. Seeing Zhou Song and the other two appear, although Qianfeng's face was gloomy to the extreme, he still pretended to be calm and said, "Zhou Song, Wu Huan, Lin Qing, what is the meaning of your sword sect?" In the end, they were still a step too late. Before they could escape, they were blocked by Zhou Song and the other two. Hearing Qianfeng's words, Zhou Song smiled and said, "Don't you know what we're here for?" With the relationship between the sword sect and the heavenly gate, Zhou Song naturally didn't need to hide the killing intent in his heart. As soon as he said this, the Lin family members were so scared that their faces turned pale. Qianfeng also said angrily in his heart, "You, Zhou Song, if you kill me, you should know the consequences. The sect master won't let the sword sect off. You say it as if letting you go will allow the sword sect and the heavenly gate to coexist peacefully." Hearing Qianfeng's words, Wu Huan sneered and said, "The relationship between the sword sect and the heavenly gate was already like fire and water. Therefore, if Qianfeng wanted to use the heavenly gate to threaten Zhou Song and the other two, it was simply a fool's dream." As Wu Huan's voice fell, Lin Qing had already taken out his longsword. Dense sword energy surrounded his body as he looked coldly at Qianfeng and said coldly, "Qianfeng, cut the crap. Today, you will definitely die." As he said this, Lin Qing took a step forward and directly attacked Qianfeng. Xiao Chun sent the three of them to kill Qianfeng. Lin Qing was too lazy to talk nonsense with him. Moreover, to prevent any more trouble, he had to kill Qianfeng first. Facing Lin Qing's attack, Qianfeng naturally couldn't do nothing. He immediately chose to fight back. As the two of them fought, the surrounding space was directly locked down by the two of them. At the same time, Zhou Song and Wu Huan didn't stay idle and immediately surrounded Qianfeng. The three end realm experts fought fiercely together. Facing this scene, the Lin family members were completely stunned. No one dared to step forward. A battle of this level was not something a small family like the Lin family could interfere in. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2135. No one from the Lin family dared to move, let alone intervene. Following the battle between Qianfeng, Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Lin Qing, the city lord of Baiqing City, who was not far away, was also watching all of this nervously. In fact, when he knew the identities of Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Lin Qing, the city lord of Baiqing City already knew the purpose of their visit. This was because the city lord of Baiqing City knew that Qianfeng was in the Lin family. Moreover, when Qianfeng arrived, the city lord of Baiqing City personally welcomed and paid a visit to the Lin family in Qianfeng. Therefore, As the deputy sect master of the sword sect, the city lord of Baiqing City naturally knew the purpose of Zhou Song and the other two's visit. Looking at Qian Feng, who was besieged by Zhou Song and the other two, the city lord of Baiqing City was filled with emotions. When Qian Feng first came to Baiqing City, it was so glorious, but now he was almost in a life-threatening situation. The city lord of Baiqing City naturally didn't dare to interfere with the matters of the sword sect and the heavenly sect. Therefore, just now, he had already informed the Tai Ching Temple of the matter through the voice transmission talisman to see how the higher-ups of the Tai Ching Temple were going to deal with it. Before receiving orders from the higher-ups, the city lord of Baiqing City obviously wouldn't casually make a move. The battle was very intense. Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Lin Qing all wanted to kill Qian Feng as soon as possible and not give him any chance to escape. Therefore, the three of them used killing moves as soon as they attacked, making it difficult for Qian Feng to deal with from the beginning. It was also because Qian Feng had an end realm cultivation that his life aura was extremely strong. It was indeed difficult to kill him in a short period of time. Otherwise, he would have been killed by Zhou Song and the other two. But looking at the current situation, if no one helped, Qian Feng would definitely die if this continued. This was because Zhou Song and the other two wouldn't give Qian Feng any chance to escape. Without a way to escape, one could imagine Qian Feng's fate. No matter how strong your life force was, you would die sooner or later when fighting one against three. All the warriors in Baiqing City were paying attention to the battle between the four, and the city lord of Baiqing City soon received a reply from the Tai Ching Temple. The content of the letter was very simple, and the meaning was also very clear, which was to not help either side. Such a reply was actually reasonable, and city lord Baiqing was not surprised. After all, whether it was the sword sect or the heavenly sect, the Great Pure One Temple could not afford to offend them. Although Tai Ching Temple was a top power, compared to Sword Sect and Heaven Joining Sect, Tai Ching Temple was still too weak. Be it End Realm, Dao Realm experts, or top combat strength, Tai Ching Temple was no match for Sword Sect and Heaven Joining Sect. So, Tai Ching Temple's best choice was to not help either side and not offend either side. After receiving the order from the higher-ups of the Great Purity Temple, the city lord of Baiqing also completely dispelled his intention to make a move. He directly chose to wait and see. As time passed, the injuries on Qian Feng's body became more and more serious. Zhou Song, Wu Huan, and Lin Qing also successfully grasped this opportunity. Their attacks became more and more violent, wanting to kill Qian Feng in one fell swoop. It had been many years since he felt the threat of death. At this moment, he was once again shrouded by the thick aura of death. Qian Feng was shocked and even a little afraid. He tried his best to block the attacks of Zhou Song and the other two, but after fighting for so long, Qian Feng also felt more and more strained. It was very difficult for him to continue. It could be said that this was his final struggle, but Qian Feng still didn't give up. Zhou Song, let me go. I agree to join the Sword Sect. No matter what, I am an End Realm expert. If I join the Sword Sect, it will definitely be of help to the Sword Sect. In the face of death, Qian Feng actually chose to betray them. He was willing to leave the Heavenly Sect and join the Sword Sect in exchange for a chance to live. Hearing Qian Feng's words, many people in Baiqing revealed a look of disdain. Betraying the sect was definitely something that everyone looked down on. After all, the sect had nurtured you, but you chose to betray the sect at the moment of life and death. Such a person was a coward in the eyes of others. Many people despised Qian Feng in their hearts. When Zhou Song heard Qian Feng's words, the corners of his mouth curled into a cold smile as he said, "I'm sorry. The order we received was to kill you. Furthermore, our sword sect doesn't need someone like you." Xiao Qian's order was to kill Qian Feng, so Zhou Song didn't hesitate to reject Qian Feng's suggestion. As his voice fell, Zhou Song punched out. Facing Zhou Song's attack, Qian Feng's expression was extremely ugly, but he still chose to resist. The two fists collided fiercely. Qian Feng used all his strength and finally succeeded in blocking Zhou Song's attack. However, at this moment, Wu Huan, who was at the side, directly slapped out with his palm. Qian Feng, who was colliding with Zhou Song, obviously had no way to deal with Wu Huan's palm. It was a direct hit, and Qian Feng's whole body was directly blasted away. He spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his injuries worsened. Being hit by Wu Huan's attack directly made Qian Feng's injuries worse. However, all of this wasn't over yet. Just as Qian Feng was seriously injured, Lin Qing was already prepared to give Qian Feng a fatal blow. The long sword in his hand bloomed with rich flame, spiritual power, and the raging flames wrapped around the long sword. Lin Qing stabbed out with his sword and shouted coldly, "Scarlet annihilation." The flames were like a giant dragon. As the long sword stabbed out, it instantly swallowed Qian Feng's body. The raging flames seemed to burn the sky, and Qian Feng's body was in such flames. Everyone knew that Qian Feng was probably finished. As time passed, about 100 breaths later, the flames slowly dissipated, and Lin Qing and Qian Feng's figures appeared in front of everyone once again. At this moment, Qian Feng's chest had been pierced by Lin Qing's sword. The rich flame, spiritual power, also burned Qian Feng's whole body black. Lin Qing's fatal blow still took Qian Feng's life in the end. An End-Realm super expert was directly killed in front of the many cultivators of Baiqing City, just like that. The fall of an End-Realm expert was extremely rare. After all, looking at the entire Great Thousand World, End-Realm experts were old ancestor-level figures who could establish their own sections. Without sovereigns, there really weren't many people who could kill them. Everyone was shocked, but the people who found it the most difficult to accept the scene in front of them were naturally the people of the Lin family. Looking at Qian Feng, whose chest had been pierced by Lin Qing's sword, the people of the Lin family were completely stunned. Their eyes were filled with disbelief. They didn't dare to believe that the Hetian sect elder Qian Feng, who was so glorious just a second ago, actually died in front of their eyes just like that. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2136. To put it bluntly, the Lin family of Baiqing City used to be an inconspicuous small family in Baiqing City. The reason why the Lin family could develop so smoothly over the years was entirely because of Qian Feng. Because Qian Feng had taken a fancy to a young lady of the Lin family and was quite fond of her, the Lin family was able to take advantage of Qian Feng's power and rise. It could be said that Qian Feng was the backer of the Lin family, but now this big backer had collapsed. For a moment, everyone in the Lin family didn't know how to express their feelings at this time. Previously, because of Qian Feng's existence, the Lin family naturally offended a lot of people in Baiqing City. However, because of Qian Feng's deterrence, no one dared to do anything to the Lin family. But now, without Qian Feng, it wasn't difficult to guess what would happen to the big families that had been offended by the Lin family. Everyone in the Lin family felt a chill in their hearts, but Zhou Song and the others didn't care about this. After Lin Qing killed Qian Feng, Zhou Song and the other two took Qian Feng's body and directly disappeared into the sky without paying attention to anyone. Zhou Song and the other two had no interest in the Lin family at all. Although the Lin family had a good relationship with Qian Feng, so what? With the Lin family's strength, they didn't pose any threat to the Sword Sect at all. Moreover, even if the Sword Sect didn't make a move, the Lin family would probably soon decline. After Zhou Song and the other two left, the city lord of Baiqing City finally breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't notice that his back was already drenched in sweat. After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, the city lord of Baiqing City glanced at the Lin family members who were still in a daze with some pity. Then, he left without saying a word and disappeared. The fall of the Lin family was already destined. After Zhou Song and the other two left, as well as the city lord of Baiqing City, the Lin family's ancestor came back to his senses after a long time. He, who was already not young, now looked even older. Looking around at the Lin family members who were a little dazed, the Lin family's ancestor said in a hoarse voice, "Let's disperse and get ready to withdraw from Baiqing City." The Lin family's ancestor was very clear that the only way out for the Lin family, which had lost Qianfeng's protection, was to take the initiative to withdraw and hand over everything that they had previously occupied unconditionally. In this way, they might still be able to save the lives of the Lin family members. However, the other members of the Lin family didn't think so, especially the young people. When they heard that the ancestor was going to withdraw from Baiqing City, someone immediately said, "Ancestor, if we withdraw from Baiqing City, what about the family's business?" Lin family's money's family's ancestor, the ancestor's ancestor of the Lin family. Facing the situation of being surrounded by wolves, the ancestor of the Lin family was very clear that if he wanted to live, he could only throw away the meat in his hands. Otherwise, he would only end up in destruction. The rise and fall of the Lin family did not matter to the Great Thousand World at all, and not many people paid attention to it. This was because the Lin family was too weak, and its rise and fall could not even cause a small ripple in the Great Thousand World. At this time, the major forces were still paying attention to the battle between the Sword Gate and the Heavenly Gate. In other words, it was the first battle between the new sect master of the Heavenly Sect, Yang Chun, and the sect master of the Sword Sect, Shao Chun. After a short day, all the major sects in the great wide world knew that Qianfeng had been killed. In the Saber Sect, Dao Ju, who had become the new sect master of the Saber Sect, was sitting in the garden and drinking wine out of boredom. A deputy sect master of the Saber Sect was reporting to him about the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect. Hearing that Elder Qianfeng of the Heavenly Gate had been killed, Dao Ju revealed a faint smile and said Qianfeng was courting death. However, in this way, Yang Chun has suffered a small loss this time. I reckon he's feeling depressed right now. That should be the case. After all, the death of an End Realm expert is something that even the Heavenly Sect can't do nothing about. Hearing this, the deputy sect leader smiled and replied, "The fall of an End Realm expert was something the Heavenly Gate couldn't ignore." As he said this, a mysterious smile appeared on Dao Ju's face. Now that the major sects are basically controlled by the younger generation, don't you think we should organize a gathering to prove the arrival of a new era? Organizing a gathering of an unprecedented scale was something that Dao Ju had been thinking about for the past few days. It was simply too boring. With Dao Ju's personality, he was indeed annoyed by all the big and small matters in the Saber Sect. Hearing Dao Ju's words, the deputy sect master of the Saber Sect did not object. After all, Dao Ju was now the sect master. No one in the Saber Sect could object to anything that he wanted to do. No one could object to him. After he said that, Dao Ju paused for a moment and decided, "Yes, we should organize a gathering of an unprecedented scale to let the world know that a new era has arrived." Dao Ju decided to hold a gathering to tell the world that a new era had arrived. Dao Ju was extremely excited because of his idea. On the other side, Yang Chun, who was in the Heavenly Sect, was in an extremely bad mood. He already knew that Qianfeng had been killed. However, a day had passed, and the anger in his heart showed no signs of dissipating. This was because Qianfeng's death meant that the first clash between Yang Chun and Shao Chun had ended in his defeat. Moreover, Yang Chun had been the one who had started the fight. In the end, he had been defeated by Shao Chun, causing him to suffer a small loss. "Damn it, you idiot. You're just a stupid pig." Sitting alone in the garden, Yang Chun's face was gloomy as he cursed furiously in his heart. Yang Chun didn't feel any pity for Qianfeng's death, nor did he feel any grief. Because in Yang Chun's opinion, Qianfeng deserved to die. What really made Yang Chun furious was that Qianfeng's death had caused him and the entire Heavenly Sect to lose face. This was what made Yang Chun furious. After cursing furiously for a while, Yang Chun took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed his anger. He looked at the old man beside him and said, "Stop all actions against the Sword Sect." Yang Chun took the initiative to stop because there was no point in continuing. Unless Yang Chun wanted to start an all-out war with the Sword Sect, but now was clearly not the time. Thus, Yang Chun could only swallow the bitter fruit and choose to stop. Hearing Yang Chun's words, the old man respectfully nodded. He then looked in the direction of the sword sect and said with a cold glint in his eyes, "Shao Chun, this is only the beginning. We still don't know who will win in the end. Don't be happy too early. Please add, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 21:37. Yang Shen's side was forced to temporarily stop. However, it was clear that after this encounter, Shao Chun and Yang Chun would definitely have many clashes and confrontations in the future. Yang Chen's side was forced to temporarily stop. However, it was clear that after this encounter, Shao Chun and Yang Chun would definitely have many clashes and confrontations in the future. Soon, there was no more movement from Hetian's sect. Shao Chun was also the first to know about this. He smiled slightly. Shao Chun could naturally guess what Yang Chen was thinking, because if he was in Yang Chen's position, he would also choose to stop at this time. The situation was like this. Now that the new era had just finished, it was obviously not suitable for a war to break out at this time. This was because no one knew what would happen after the new sect master of the other sects took over. Therefore, during this period, no one wanted to take the initiative to start a war. The short exchange between Hetian's sect and Sword sect quickly came to an end. However, the result was unexpected. It was obvious that Hetian's sect suffered a huge loss. They lost an End Realm Elder. This loss was obviously much greater than the loss of the Sword sect. Peace was temporarily restored. A few days later, Shao Chun and Jun Huiya also rushed to the Moon Palace because Xiao Xiao was confirmed to be the next palace master of the Moon Palace. Like the other sovereigns, Luo Xing also retreated behind the scenes and became the old ancestor of the Moon Palace. He no longer directly cared about the Moon Palace's affairs. As for Xiao Zhao's succession, it was indeed a reasonable thing. There was nothing strange about it. Shao Chun and Jun Huiya arrived at the Moon Palace. Xiao Zhao's succession ceremony was also very lively, like the other sect succession ceremonies. With Xiao Xiao becoming the palace master of the Moon Palace, apart from the Dragon Palace, the rest of the 10 Great Lingtian sects were all led by the younger generation. After the inauguration ceremony, Shao Chun was not in a hurry to leave. It was not that Shao Chun did not want to leave, but he was forced to stay by Dao Ju. Dao Ju also came to attend Xiao Zhao's succession ceremony. After the ceremony, Dao Ju invited Shao Chun, Li Chun, and Xiao Xiao to sit together. Originally, Li Chun Dao Ju said that he had something to discuss. Now that all 4 of them were present, Li Chun said calmly, "Just say what you have to say. Why are you being so secretive?" Dao Ju's behavior was indeed very mysterious. Until now, she had not told the 3 of them what the matter was. Hearing Li Chun's words, Dao Ju smiled faintly and said, "Of course there's a matter. Now that the younger generation is basically in charge of the Great Thousand World, I want to take this opportunity to hold a grand event and invite all the young geniuses to participate. How about it? Isn't it exciting just thinking about it?" Saber Ju said excitedly. However, Li Chun didn't show any mercy when he heard this. "You called us here just for this." Dao Ju's character and Li Chun's character were 2 extremes. Dao Ju felt that such a grand event was simply too exciting, but Li Chun felt that it was meaningless because it was completely meaningless. Seeing Li Chun's indifference, Dao Ju's face immediately darkened and said, "Li Chun, what do you mean?" When he was with Li Chun, Saber Ju only felt that it was pointless to talk to him. In the face of Saber Ju's angry shout, Li Chun did not take it to heart at all. He said, "Nothing. I just feel bored." Li Chun was obviously not interested in this. Seeing this, Dao Ju simply ignored him and turned to Shao Chun and Shao Chun. "Brother Shao Chun, what do you think of my suggestion?" Dao Ju was obviously very playful, and it was obviously impossible to persuade him at this time. Therefore, Shao Chun did not object to this, but he also did not express his support. However, seeing that Shao Chun did not object, Dao Ju was completely excited. He immediately patted his chest and promised that the Saber sect would be fully responsible for the grand event. Dao Ju wanted to organize a grand event of an unprecedented scale to gather all the influential people in the Great Thousand World. According to Dao Ju's idea, he even wanted to invite the sect leaders of the first-rate forces. If this was really the case, then the scale of the event would indeed be unprecedentedly vast. However, if he wanted to achieve such a large scale, the Saber sect alone would not be enough. At the very least, he needed the agreement of Shao Chun and the other three present. He did not need any help from Shao Chun and the others. He only needed the reputation of the Sword Sect, the Moon Palace, and the Heavenly Policy Mansion. Only if the four great sects jointly organized the event would it have enough appeal. Dao Ju had already thought about the grand event, and Shao Chun and the others did not object. The matter was smoothly settled just like that. Of course, Dao Ju was responsible for everything. Shao Chun and the other two were obviously not interested in these matters. After the matter of the grand event was settled, Dao Ju left the Moon Palace in high spirits. After Shao Chun and Shao bade farewell, they also returned to the Sword Sect together with Jun Wuya. As the threat from a heavenly sect was no longer present, the Sword Sect had once again regained its peace. Shao Chun naturally immersed himself in cultivation every day. When he was free, he would accompany his parents, Qin Shu, and the other girls, as well as Luan and the others. His days were rather comfortable. Time passed day by day, and the Sword Sect's strength continued to improve. However, it was obvious that there would not be any leaps and bounds of improvement in a short period of time. Everything had returned to peace. Not only the Sword Sect, but the entire Great Thousand World seemed to have returned to peace. It was originally thought that there would be a period of chaos between the old and the new era, but now it seemed that things were not so. However, with regard to the current situation, anyone with a discerning eye knew that all of this was just an illusion. To put it bluntly, the peace of the Great Thousand World was more like the calm before the storm. The current peace obviously could not be maintained for too long. On this day, Xian Yuanling, who had been in seclusion for a long time, finally came out. His cultivation had reached the beginning of the Dao state, which was only a small realm lower than Shao Chen's. After obtaining the inheritance of the Reincarnation Emperor, Xian Yuanling's cultivation speed was indeed extremely fast. Furthermore, in the entire Great Thousand World, Xian Yuanling was probably the only one who could inherit the inheritance of the Reincarnation Emperor. After all, in this world, how many people could be as lucky as Xian Yuanling to be reincarnated? Xian Yuanling's strength had made a huge breakthrough, but this time he also made a decision to go out and train alone after coming out of seclusion. In the courtyard, Shao Chun and Xian Yuanling sat in the pavilion. Looking at Xian Yuanling in front of him, Shao Chun said with some hesitation, "Big brother, the Great Thousand World is very turbulent now. I'm afraid it's not appropriate for you to go out and train alone. Why don't I get someone to follow you so that we can take care of you?" The Great Thousand World could be said to be at the cusp of the storm due to the change of era. At this time, Shao Chun did not feel at ease letting Xian Yuanling go out and train alone. After all, since the Sword Sect could kill Qian Feng, the Heavenly Sect could naturally send someone to kill Xian Yuanling, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter, Chapter 2138. Shao Chun did not approve of Xian Yuanling going out to train alone at this time because it was too dangerous, especially during such a special period. Shao Chun did not approve of Xian Yuanling going out to train alone at this time because it was too dangerous, especially during such a special period. However, in the face of Shao Chun's obstruction, Xian Yuanling said firmly, "Third brother, don't worry. I will be careful this time. Furthermore, according to the inheritance of the Reincarnation Emperor, I know the place where the Reincarnation Emperor fell. Only I can enter that place, so there's no point in letting others follow me." The reason why Xian Yuanling was so determined to go out to train alone was that after this closed-door training, along with the improvement of his cultivation and the mastery of the reincarnation power, Xian Yuanling knew the place where the Reincarnation Emperor fell. There, the Reincarnation Emperor had prepared a generous gift for his successor, a gift that was enough to let Xian Yuanling be reborn. It was because of this that Xian Yuanling was so determined to go out to train alone. After hearing Xian Yuanling's words, Xiao Chun fell silent. He knew that this was indeed a great opportunity for Xian Yuanling, something that he could not give up. Unable to find a reason to stop Xian Yuanling, Xiao Chun could only give the last spatial compass he had to Xian Yuanling in the end. This was the last spatial compass Xiao Chun had, and it was a life-saving measure for Xiao Chun. He gave it to Xian Yuanling so that Xian Yuanling would at least have a way to escape when he was in danger. Compared to himself, Xian Yuanling naturally needed this spatial compass more when he went out alone. After all, Xiao Chun was now in the sword sect, and there were powerhouses from the sword sect protecting him. It was actually very difficult to kill Xiao Chun. Hence, the spatial compass was not very useful to him. After instructing Xian Yuanling about many things, Xian Yuanling smiled helplessly and said, "Third brother, we are not going to be separated forever. Is there need to be like this?" Xian Yuanling felt that Xiao Chun was too long-winded. In this regard, Xiao Chun smiled bitterly and said, "Big brother, you don't know the current situation of the great thousand world. It's always right to be careful. Third brother, don't worry. I will definitely not die, so you don't have to worry," Xian Yuanling said with a smile. The next morning, Xiao Chun personally sent Xian Yuanling. As for where the place where the reincarnation emperor fell, Xiao Chun did not ask. He only reminded Xian Yuanling to be careful and to contact him when necessary. Xian Yuanling, Xiao Chun's return. Xian Yuanling, and Xian Yuanling's life. Xian Yuanling personally return. After seeing Xian Yuanling off personally, Xiao Chun returned to his residence. What surprised him was that Junwei was actually there. Seeing Xiao Chun return, Junwei asked softly, "Is he gone?" He knew who Junwei was asking about. Naturally, it was Xian Yuanling. In this regard, Xiao Chun did not hide anything and nodded in response. Seeing this, Junwei took a sip of tea. Then, a faint smile appeared on his face, and he said, "This kid is not bad." He was able to perfectly accept the inheritance of the reincarnation emperor. This trip is undoubtedly an experience of rebirth for him. I only hope that he can return safely. As for Xian Yuanling, Junwei did not teach him anything. He only gave him the inheritance of the reincarnation emperor. Originally, Junwei did not understand the reincarnation Tao, so there was nothing for him to teach Xian Yuanling. However, Xian Yuanling's performance did surprise Junwei. He was self-taught and actually perfectly grasped the inheritance of the reincarnation emperor. This made Junwei look at him in a new light. Hearing Junwei's words, Xiao Chun did not say much. He smiled and asked, "Master, is there a reason for your visit today?" Under normal circumstances, Junwei rarely took the initiative to look for him. Therefore, Xiao Chun guessed that Junwei was here for something. Hearing Xiao Chun's words, Junwei nodded slightly and said, "There is indeed a matter. I think I will be leaving for a period of time." Junwei was about to leave again. Hearing this, Xiao Chun's heart sank. Without Junwei, the sword sect would not be able to withstand the attack of the heavenly sect. If Yang Chun attacked at this time, the sword sect would be in danger again. As if he had seen through Xiao Chun's thoughts, Junwei smiled and said, "Don't worry, it's not just me. All the emperors in the great thousand world are the same. Therefore, you don't have to worry about the heavenly sect. They also don't have any emperors to guard them during this period of time." Junwei explained. However, Xiao Chun was even more confused. All the emperors in the great thousand world were leaving at the same time. What was going on? He looked at Junwei in confusion. Seeing this, Junwei also explained. "Tenzu invited us, so all the emperors must be present. Tenzu wanted it, so all the emperors in the great thousand world were leaving at the same time." Hearing this, Xiao Chun's eyes revealed a look of understanding. Xiao Chun had heard a little about Tenzu. It was said that he was the ancestor of all the will of the heavenly way, and also the first will of the heavenly way in this world. He was extremely powerful and controlled the laws of the great thousand world. Tenzu was very powerful, but there was a big difference between the great thousand world and other worlds, and that was the existence of emperors. Therefore, under normal circumstances, Tenzu rarely interfered in the affairs of the Great Thousand World. More often than not, Tenzu's role was to maintain the operation of the Great Thousand World. In addition, it was said that Tenzu was the existence with the purest time, unlike cultivators who more or less had some distracting thoughts in their hearts. As a result, even the emperors were extremely respectful to the celestial race. Nominally, the Sky Ancestor and the sovereigns were on equal footing. The Sky Ancestor did not have the ability to kill the sovereigns, but over the years, the sovereigns of the Great Thousand World had treated the Sky Ancestor with heartfelt respect, so the two sides got along well. This time, Tenzu took the initiative to invite the emperors of the Great Thousand World. It was probably related to the change of era. After all, the major forces of the Great Thousand World had basically changed their leaders this time. It was impossible for Tenzu not to have noticed such a thing. It was not a big deal, so Junwuya only told Xiaochun about it. After he left, Junwuya also told Xiaochun not to worry too much about the Coiling Heaven sect. After all, the Sword sect no longer had Junwuya, and the Coiling Heaven sect no longer had Tao Ming. Both sides did not have emperors to oversee them. Therefore, with the current strength of the Sword sect, they did not need to fear the Coiling Heaven sect. Moreover, if the Coiling Heaven sect wanted to attack the Sword sect at this time, they would not have much of a chance. After briefly informing Xiaochun, Xiaochun also asked Junwuya, "Master, when will you be back?" "It's hard to say. About a year and a half," Junwuya replied. "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." End of this chapter. Chapter 2139. The existence of Tenzu was more like a legend to the people of the Great Thousand World, because no one had ever seen Tenzu except for the sovereigns. Some people once said that Tenzu liked to travel around and would transform into all kinds of people and even demonic beasts. Even a wild dog on the side of the road could be transformed from Tenzu. The heavenly ancestor liked to change into different identities and travel the world, experiencing all kinds of bitterness and sweetness. These were just legends, and no one could prove them. However, one thing was certain, and that was only by becoming an emperor would one have the possibility of seeing the heavenly ancestor in person. Although Xiaochun was now the sect master of the Sword sect, he was obviously not qualified to see Tenzu. In fact, it was not only Xiaochun, Daoju, Xiao, and the others who had never seen Tenzu either. The whereabouts of the heavenly ancestor and what he looked like were all mysteries to the world. Perhaps only the emperors knew these things. Junwuya did not stay with Xiaochun for long. After chatting casually for a while, he got up and left. In just one day, Xin Yuanling and Junwuya had both left. Xiaochun felt a little helpless in his heart. Very few people knew that in just one day, all the sovereigns in the Great Thousand World had disappeared together. They had all been invited to the place where Tenzu was. It could be said that the Great Thousand World was now a world without sovereigns. Without the existence of the sovereigns, some of the younger generation could not suppress the restlessness in their hearts. For a time, many forces began to have conflicts. Of course, the scale of these conflicts was not large. They were only at the testing stage, but it was obvious that this was the beginning of a great era of competition. Accompanied by the restlessness of a younger generation, after a month, an even more exciting piece of news was personally announced by the Saber sect. It was that a grand event that would sweep across the entire Great Thousand World was about to be held. The name of this grand event was known as the Dividing Mountain Grand Event, which implied the divide between the old and the new era. As soon as the news of the Dividing Ridge Grand Gathering spread, the Great Thousand World fell into a frenzy. In particular, many young warriors were extremely excited. This was because the Dividing Ridge Grand Meeting this time was organized by the 10 Great Ling sects and the Sword sect. It covered almost all the forces in the Great Thousand World and could be said to be the greatest grand meeting in the Great Thousand World. It was unknown what method this Daoju had used to get the 10 Great Ling Tian sects to agree to hold this Dividing Ridge meeting. With the 10 Great Ling Tian sects appearing together, one could imagine the scale of the Dividing Ridge meeting. As a member of the Sword Sect, Xiao Chun had naturally received an invitation to the Mountain Divide meeting. It was scheduled to be held a month later at the Zun Mountain Range to the east of the city of Emperor. Looking at the golden invitation in his hand, Xiao Chun smiled faintly and said, "This Dao Ju really can't stay idle. Yes, this dividing ridge meeting is going to cause an uproar. I reckon that more than half of the warriors in the Great Thousand World will go to the Zun Mountain Range to participate. Moreover, the Saber Sect has specially sent people over in hopes that the Sword Sect will send people to the Zun Mountain Range to help prepare and maintain the order of this dividing ridge meeting. After all, the Sword Sect is also the organizer of this dividing ridge meeting," Nangongwan said when she heard Xiao Chen's words. The 10 great Ling Tian sects and the Sword Sect were the organizers of this dividing ridge meeting. Therefore, the Saber Sect naturally hoped that the Sword Sect would send people to help. After all, this dividing ridge meeting had caused such a huge uproar in the Great Thousand World. Without enough people to maintain order, it was obviously impossible. Hearing Nangongwan's words, Xiao Chun did not mind and said, "I'll leave this matter to eldest senior brother." Xiao Chun had no interest in interfering in these matters, so he left full authority to Nangongwan. Hearing this, Nangongwan smiled helplessly and said, "You have it easy as a sect leader." In private, Nangongwan, Zhou Song, Xiao Chun, Wu Huan, and the other senior brother spoke very casually. Therefore, Nangongwan dared to joke with Xiao Chun. In this regard, Xiao Chun did not take it to heart. He smiled and said, "Eldest senior brother, have you heard of this saying? Capable people do more work." After saying this, Xiao Chun laughed heartily and walked away. The dividing ridge meeting had caused an uproar in the Great Thousand World. As it continued to spread, more and more people rushed to the Zun Mountain Range. Of course, these people definitely had no way to enter the Zun Mountain Range now. At this time, the Zun Mountain Range had been directly sealed by many experts of the 10 great Lingtian sects and the Sword Sect. Only the sect leaders of the various major forces who had received an invitation could enter. Moreover, other than the 10 great Lingtian sects, regardless of whether you were from a super first-rate force or a first-rate force, you could only bring 2 followers at most. The rules were very strict. Anyone who dared to break the rules would be killed by the experts of the 10 great Lingtian sects and the Sword Sect. However, in the Zun Mountain Range, the most talked about thing now was the battle between the Heavenly Union Sect and the Sword Sect. Xiao Chun and Yang Chun had not arrived at the Zun Mountain Range yet. However, at the request of the Saber Sect, the 2 sects had sent many experts to the Zun Mountain Range to be in charge of preparing for this dividing ridge meeting. The sect leaders of both sides were not present, but this did not prevent the people under them from being hostile to each other. The Sword Sect was led by 2 deputy sect leaders, Yang Song and Li Ku. On the other hand, the Heavenly Union Sect was led by 2 End Realm Elders. In just a few days, many battles had broken out between the 2 sections. Although the scale was not large, and they were quickly stopped, this did not solve the problem at all. This was because as soon as the disciples of both sides met, there was no doubt that they would draw their swords against each other. On this day, the few disciples of the Sword Sect who were in charge of guarding the east side of the Zun Mountain Range were originally doing as usual. They were blocking the many cultivators who came to the Zun Mountain Range outside the mountain range. However, at this moment, 5 disciples of the Heavenly Union Sect swaggered over. Seeing the Heavenly Union Sect disciples appear, many cultivators on the outside of the mountain range were instantly interested. Many people directly spoke up. "The people of the Heavenly Union Sect are here. There will be a good show to watch." Many people knew about the enmity between the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Union Sect. However, there were still some people who did not know the inside story. Therefore, some people asked softly, "So what if the people of the Heavenly Union Sect are here? Aren't they together?" They thought that the Heavenly Union Sect and the Sword Sect were together. After all, the dividing ridge meeting this time was jointly organized by these few major powers. Hearing this, some people who knew the inside story smiled proudly and said, "They don't even know? Let me tell you, the Heavenly Union Sect and the Sword Sect can be said to be sworn enemies. As long as they meet, They will definitely not end peacefully. Just watch. There will be a good show to watch soon. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2140. There would be a good show to watch soon. Upon hearing this, those who did not understand the reason looked curiously at the disciples from the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect. There would be a good show to watch soon. Upon hearing this, those who did not understand the reason looked curiously at the disciples from the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, a few disciples from the Heavenly Sect quickly arrived in front of the disciples from the Sword Sect. The leader looked at the disciples from the Sword Sect in disdain and sneered mockingly. A bunch of trash. How dare you dream of being on par with the 10 great Ling Tian sects? Why don't you take a piss and look in a mirror? After he finished speaking, he prepared to leave with his people. Upon hearing this, the leader of the disciples from the Sword Sect was not to be outdone. He replied coldly, "After I kill you, you'll know whether our Sword Sect is qualified or not." The Sword Sect was undoubtedly the sect closest to the 10 great Ling Tian sects in the Great Thousand World. However, up until now, the Sword Sect had not truly entered the ranks of the 10 great Ling Tian sects. This could be said to be the obsession of many elders and disciples in the Sword Sect. In order to truly enter the ranks of the 10 great Ling Tian sects, the entire Sword Sect had always been working hard. Moreover, they firmly believed that this day would come sooner or later. One day, the Sword Sect would definitely be able to step on the altar again. It was precisely because of this confidence that the disciples from the Sword Sect were not afraid or guilty when facing the disciples from the Heavenly Sect. As soon as he finished speaking, he did not wait for the disciple from the Sword Sect to reply. He immediately drew out his long sword and fiercely stabbed it towards the disciple from the Heavenly Sect. Without any nonsense, he chose to directly attack. This was the most direct demonstration of the current relationship between the Sword Sect and the Heavenly Sect. The disciple from the Heavenly Sect had long been on guard against the actions of the disciple from the Sword Sect. Therefore, he instantly attacked as well. Instantly, the disciples from the two sects engaged in a fierce battle. They're fighting just like that? Looking at the fierce battle between the disciples of the two sects, some of the onlookers couldn't help but comment. They didn't expect that in less than 3 sentences, the two sides had already engaged in a fierce battle. These people did not know the inside story. Someone at the side also opened his mouth to explain, "This is nothing." Sometimes he just acts without saying anything. That's right. You don't know the relationship between the Sword Sect and the Coheaven Sect. Let's put it this way, the Sword Sect and the Coheaven Sect are destined to only exist on one side. In the future, either the Sword Sect defeats the Coheaven Sect and rejoins the ranks of the top 10 Ling Tian sects, or the Coheaven Sect destroys the Sword Sect and makes the Sword Sect disappear completely. That's right. I heard that the sect leaders of the Sword Sect and He Tian Sect are sworn enemies. I really wonder what will happen if the two of them meet. Forget it. That kind of big shot isn't someone that we can meet just because we want to. When the ordinary disciples of the Coheaven Sect and Sword Sect met, they would fight to the death. As such, everyone was naturally curious. If Xiao Chun and Yang Chen met, what would the situation be like? More than 10 disciples engaged in a fierce battle. But soon, the experts of the Sword Sect and Coheaven Sect arrived one after another. Both sides had 2 Dao Realm experts. The Sword Sect had 2 sword heads, while the Coheaven Sect also had 2 Dao Realm experts. When the experts of both sides arrived, although they stopped their disciples, their words were still unforgiving. After one of the Sword Sect's sword heads stopped a few disciples of the Sword Sect, he looked at the people of the Coheaven Sect with a sneer and said, "Your Coheaven Sect is really troublesome. Why? Do you feel uncomfortable if you don't get beaten up for a day? TSK, isn't there a need to talk about who is beating who? Why, do you want to fight too? If so, then I will accompany you to the end." Hearing this, the experts of the Coheaven Sect didn't back down. The battle that had just ended became tense once more because of the words of the experts of both sides. Moreover, this time, The Dao realm experts of both sects were facing off. Seeing that the Dao realm experts of both sides didn't back down at all, just as everyone felt that another huge battle was about to erupt, two people suddenly appeared in the sky. One of them was Yang Song, who had just broken through to End Realm. The other was an End Realm elder of the Coheaven sect. When the two of them appeared, the elder of the Coheaven sect looked at Yang Song and said in an unfriendly tone, "Yang Song, manage your sword sect people well." "Of course, I will manage my people. However, some people are asking to die, so I can't do anything about it." When he heard this, Yang Song didn't hold back at all. What was originally a simple conflict had drawn out the End Realm experts of both sections. However, after all, Yang Song and the others had different statuses and knew that now wasn't the time to start a war. So, even if they didn't like one another, Yang Song and the elder of the Coheaven sect chose to stop at the same time. Now that the Splitting Mountain Festival was about to start, it wasn't suitable to start a war now. Moreover, be it Xiao Chun or Yang Song, they weren't prepared for an all-out war. This was something that the higher-ups of the two sects, Yang Song and the elder of the Coheaven sect, were clear about. So for the big picture, they had no choice but to temporarily take a step back. However, just as Yang Song and the elder of the Coheaven sect were prepared to leave, no one expected that a calm voice would spread out from the sky. "You want to leave after the fight? Does your sword sect not have any rules?" Along with the voice, 4 figures appeared in the sky at the same time. The one leading them was a youth with a gloomy face. At the start, no one knew the identity of the youth. However, as the elder of the Coheaven sect bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, sect leader," only then did everyone know that the person who had come was none other than the new sect leader of the Coheaven sect, Yang Chun. The sect leader of the Coheaven sect had personally appeared, which made everyone excited. At the same time, Yang Song's eyes flashed with a hint of seriousness. He didn't expect Yang Chun to arrive at the Zun Emperor mountain range at this time. Although many sect leaders of the various factions had arrived as the Splitting Mountain Festival was approaching, Yang Chun's arrival at this time had indeed increased the pressure on Yang Song. His gaze locked onto Yang Song as he said with a cold smile, "You want to fight and leave as you wish. What do you think my Coheaven sect is? A soft persimmon? Someone you can bully as you wish?" Yang Chun's words were full of provocation. In response, a trace of coldness gradually appeared in Yang Song's eyes. However, he forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart and said, "Then what does sect leader Yang Chun want?" Yang Song wasn't afraid of Yang Chun, but he was worried that he would ruin Xiao Chen's plans because of his impulsiveness. After all, Yang Chun wasn't someone that the elders of the Coheaven sect could compare to. As long as Yang Chun wanted to, he could launch an all-out war against the Sword sect at any time. If he caused an all-out war between the two sects at this time, Yang Song would feel that he had let Xiao Chen down. Therefore, he would rather endure it. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2141. Yang Song suppressed the anger in his heart and asked. Hearing this, Yang Chun sneered. "What do you think? Huh, you're not qualified to talk to me. Let Xiao Chen talk to me personally." Yang Song suppressed the anger in his heart and asked. Hearing this, Yang Chun sneered. "What do you think? Huh, you're not qualified to talk to me. Let Xiao Chen talk to me personally." Yang Chen's arrogant appearance caused the anger in Yang Song's heart to accumulate, but he couldn't let it out at all. He could only look at Yang Chun coldly without saying a word. Yang Chen's appearance had indeed boosted the strength of the heavenly sect. However, just as Yang Chen's voice fell, Xiao Chun, Xiao Xiao, and several experts from the Moon Palace and the Sword sect appeared in the sky. It was the first time the two had met, but as soon as they appeared, Xiao Chen's gaze fell on Yang Chun. He sneered and said, "Sect Master Yang, you're quite angry. I'm here. What do you want?" No one expected Xiao Chun to appear at this time. Seeing Xiao Chun, Yang Song was overjoyed, but he quickly bowed respectfully and said, "Greetings, Sect Master." Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao came together, But they didn't expect to encounter such a situation as soon as they arrived at the sovereign mountain range. Hearing Xiao Qin's words and looking at Xiao Chun in front of him, Yang Qin's eyes unconsciously flashed with a cold light. Although it was the first time the two had met, the hostility in their words couldn't be more obvious. Their eyes met, and Yang Qin finally sneered and said, "What do you think? Xiao Chun, do you really think I can't do anything to you?" Yang Chun shouted coldly, but Xiao Chun didn't take it seriously and said with a smile, "Do you want to try?" As he spoke, a faint killing intent appeared around Xiao Chun. At the same time, Xiao Xiao also took a step forward and stood side by side with Xiao Chun. His gaze towards Yang Chun was filled with hostility. Xiao Xiao was definitely on Xiao Chen's side. There was no doubt about it. Looking at Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao, Yang Chen's expression became more and more unsightly. Yang Chun was obviously not stupid to face two geniuses at the same time. He knew that the current situation was not good for him. Although Yang Chun believed that Xiao Chun could not kill him in the Sovereign Mountain Range, who could guarantee that Xiao Chun was not a lunatic? The coldness in his eyes intensified. Yang Chun was naturally unwilling to admit defeat to Xiao Chun since it was their first meeting. The situation was getting more and more tense. Just when everyone thought that the Sword Gate and He Tian sect were going to fight, a young man in white suddenly appeared on the scene. The white-clothed young man appeared with a warm smile on his face. He smiled at Xiao Chun and Yang Chun and said, "The three of you, why don't we talk at the Dividing Ridge meeting?" The young man's name was Dan Xin, and he was the current Valley Master of the Dan Valley. He was also Dan Xingyang's disciple and was also a genius in the Great Thousand World. Moreover, because he was from the Dan Valley, Dan Xin had also inherited the tradition of the Dan Valley, which was to have a wide network of connections. Among the geniuses in the Great Thousand World, Dan Xin was probably the one with the best connections. After all, Dan Xin was an alchemist, and many people were unwilling to offend him. Moreover, Dan Xin was very easygoing and always gave people a feeling of being bathed in the spring breeze. Dan Xion's timely appearance seemed to have resolved the battle. Seeing this, Yang Chun naturally took advantage of the situation and snorted coldly. "Xiao Chun, don't be happy too early. You and I have plenty of time to settle all of this." The Dividing Ridge meeting was indeed not the time to fight. Moreover, based on the previous situation, Yang Chun was obviously at a disadvantage. This was because Xiao Chun had Xiao Zhao's help, while Yang Chun was alone. If they really fought, Yang Chun would have to face the joint forces of two geniuses at the same time. This was extremely disadvantageous for Yang Chun. As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for Xiao Chun to reply, Yang Chun looked at Dan Xin and forced a smile. "Brother Dan Xin, I'll take my leave first. See you at the Dividing Ridge meeting." With that, Yang Chun led the people from Heavenly Union sect away. In the first meeting between Xiao Chun and Yang Chun, it seemed that Yang Chun had suffered a small loss. However, this was not important at all because there was no substantial meaning to it. Therefore, seeing that Yang Chun was leaving, Xiao Chun had no intention of stopping him. This was because Xiao Chun also did not want to fight at the Dividing Ridge meeting. As Yang Chun and the people from Heavenly Union sect left, the atmosphere in the field gradually relaxed. At this time, Dan Xin took the initiative to come in front of Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao and said with a smile, "Brother Xiao Chun, junior sister Xiao Xiao, let's go to the Sovereign Mountain Range together." He took the initiative to invite Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao to go to the Sovereign Mountain Range together. In response, Xiao Chun and Xiao Xiao did not refuse. Then, the group immediately headed towards the Sovereign Mountain Range. After witnessing the four geniuses, Xiao Chun, Xiao Xiao, Yang Chun, and Dan Xin, many warriors present were extremely excited. Although they did not get to see the battle between Xiao Chun and Yang Chun, it did not dampen their excitement. Watching Xiao Chun and the other two leave, many of the warriors present were stunned and murmured softly, "It would be great if I could personally participate in the Dividing Ridge meeting." Everyone's wish was to be able to participate in this Dividing Ridge meeting, but unfortunately, they were not qualified. They came all the way to the Sovereign Mountain Range. For this dividing ridge meeting, the Sovereign Mountain Range had long been controlled by the Sword Sect and several other major forces. Moreover, a magnificent palace had been built in the Sovereign Mountain Range. This palace was suspended in the air above the Sovereign Mountain Range. Rather than saying that it was built, it was better to say that the palace itself was a supreme treasure. Suspended in the air above the Sovereign Mountain Range, thick white clouds gathered around the palace. On top of the white clouds, there were many short tables and futons. From time to time, there were figures taking the initiative to sit on the white clouds. It was like a fairyland, and the dividing ridge meeting was held in the clouds above the horizon. When Xiao Chun and the other two arrived at the palace, Dao Ju, Li Chun, and the others had already arrived. Dao Ju personally appeared to welcome Xiao Chun and the other two. As soon as he saw Xiao Chun, Dao Ju spoke without thinking. "Brother Xiao Chun, I heard that you almost fought with Yang Chun. How did it go? Who won?" Dao Ju was obviously a person who enjoyed watching a good show. When he heard that Xiao Chun and Yang Chun had almost fought outside the Sovereign Mountain Range, not only did Dao Ju not try to persuade them, but he even asked who lost in the end. Hearing Dao Ju's words, Xiao Chun smiled helplessly, while Xiao Xiao snorted coldly and said, "You talk too much. If you have the ability, why don't you fight with Yang Chun?" "Haha, I can't get away right now." "Don't worry, there will always be a chance to fight with him in the future." Hearing Xiao Zhao's words, Dao Ju laughed loudly without a care. Then, the group strode into the palace. "Please add me to your collection. Monthly vote. Recommend me." End of chapter. With so many sect masters gathered together, it could be said that almost all the powerful figures in the great wide world had gathered together. With so many people gathered in the Emperor Mountain Range, they naturally could not let their guard down. Therefore, at the various entrances of the Emperor Mountain Range, the powerhouses of the 10 great Ling Tian sects and the Sword Sect were on guard. Otherwise, the martialists who had gathered outside the mountain range would sneak into the mountain range. However, even at the periphery of the mountain range, everyone could still see the scene above the clouds in the sky. They saw figures appearing one after another, gathering in groups of 3 to 5 and talking about something. The clouds in the sky were the venue of the dividing ridge grand gathering. As time passed, more and more sect masters gathered here. Although the martialists who were not qualified to participate in this dividing ridge grand gathering were at the periphery of the Emperor Mountain Range, they could still see the scene in the clouds in the sky from afar. Therefore, everyone was reluctant to leave this time because everyone wanted to witness this unprecedented dividing ridge grand gathering with their own eyes. Countless pairs of eyes looked at the clouds in the sky from afar. Finally, after all the sect masters and sect masters had arrived, Xiao Chun, Dao Ju, and the other sect masters of the 10 great Ling Tian sects walked out of the hall and appeared in front of everyone. It was worth mentioning here that because Dragon Palace had not yet had a new sect master, the person sent by Dragon Palace this time was Long Qing, who came as the Dragon Lady of Dragon Palace. However, although Long Qing was not the Palace Master of Dragon Palace yet, Long Qing had already announced to the public that Long Qing had almost the same power as the Palace Master of Dragon Palace. The reason why Long Qing had not become the Palace Master of Dragon Palace yet was because she had only joined Dragon Palace for a short time. Moreover, perhaps it was because Long Qing herself was unwilling. After all, in Long Qing's opinion, if she became the Palace Master, she would not be able to be with Xiao Chun and Xin Yuanling in the future. Therefore, Long Qing was somewhat conflicted about the position of Palace Master of Dragon Palace. Combined with the above reasons, Long Qing came as the Dragon Lady of Dragon Palace this time. Of course, this did not affect anything. With the appearance of Xiao Chun and the others, many of the sect masters and sect masters present looked at them. All of them had different expressions in their eyes. Looking at Xiao Chun and the other geniuses, the sect leaders and clan lords could not help but sigh. In the next thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, the Great Thousand World would probably belong to these geniuses. They would eventually grow into the new generation of sovereigns, just like Jun Wuya and the others, who would lead the entire Great Thousand World. The change of era was inevitable, and this watershed grand ceremony was more like a press conference to announce the arrival of a new era. This was something that everyone present could empathize with. Even some of the younger generation were already very excited at this time. Looking at Xiao Chun and the other geniuses, their eyes were full of yearning for the new era. Under the gaze of the crowd, Xiao Chun and the others took their seats on the high platform outside the hall. Then, Dao Ju took the initiative to speak. Thank you all for coming to this watershed grand ceremony. There are no complicated rules in this grand ceremony, so please relax and don't be restrained. Dao Ju said with a smile. As Dao Ju finished speaking, the sect masters took their seats one after another. Then, everyone drank and chatted. Of course, as martial artists, sparring was inevitable. However, this time around, Xiao Chun and the other geniuses had no intention of making a move. After all, their statuses were different now. Xiao Chun and the others could be said to be holding great authority now. It would indeed be inappropriate for them to casually make a move like they did before. However, although he could not fight personally, the people below could. After a few rounds of sparring, Yin Tianyi took the initiative to look at Xiao Chun and said, "Brother Xiao Chun, how about it? Are you interested in sparring with me?" Yin Tianyi took the initiative to speak. His words were full of provocation. Hearing this, Xiao Chun smiled. However, just as Xiao Chun was about to speak, Xiao Chun spoke first. "Since Sect Master Yun is interested, why don't you let Moon Palace accompany you?" Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2143. Xiao Xiao was the first to speak. Yin Tianyi said, so, because of Yang Chun. Hence, Xiao Xiao accepted the challenge for Xiao Chun without hesitation. Yin Tianyi smiled when he heard Xiao Xiao's words. He then turned to Xiao Xiao and said, "Since Sect Master Xiao is interested, I will naturally accompany you." Then, Yin Tianyi said to an elder of Mu Tian Mountain, "Go and experience the strength of the people from Moon Palace. Remember not to hurt anyone." Hearing Yang Chen's words, the Mu Tian Mountain elder immediately cupped his hands and replied, "Yes." The elder of Mu Tian Mountain had the cultivation of Dao realm great perfection. Xiao Xiao was not to be outdone. She glanced at the elder of Moon Palace. The elder of Moon Palace also walked out. The two of them came to the center of the banquet. There was a protective array there to ensure that the aftershocks of the battle would not affect the people present. The two of them stood facing each other. Without saying much, the elder of Mu Tian Mountain attacked first. He threw out a punch and immediately attacked the elder of Moon Palace. In the face of elder Mu Tianshan's attack, the beautiful lady from Moon Palace had no intention of dodging. She did not even try to dodge. Instead, she threw out a light blow. Their fists and palms collided and a terrifying shockwave erupted. Both of their cultivation were at Dao realm great perfection. However, the moment they exchanged blows, they unleashed a terrifying power that caught everyone's attention. It was obvious that both of them did not hold back at all. After all, no one wanted to lose in such a situation. They did not want to embarrass their sect. They went all out. In the blink of an eye, the two of them had exchanged more than 100 blows. On the high platform, the crowd watched the two of them fight and chatted casually. Yin Tianyi looked at Xiao Xiao and asked, "Sect Master Xiao, who do you think will win?" Yin Tianyi's words were obviously provocative. Xiao Xiao did not back down and replied, "Who knows? However, I don't think it will be Moon Palace." Xiao Xiao was confident that the elder of Moon Palace would not lose. Of course, this was only a verbal statement. Everyone could tell that the two of them were on par with each other. It was hard to say who would win. Xiao Xiao did not back down. Yin Tianyi smiled and said, "Since that is the case, let's wait and see." After speaking, Yin Tianyi did not say anything else. He once again turned his gaze towards the two people in the arena. In the intense battle, the two of them also repeatedly unleashed their powerful martial skills. Their strength was also completely revealed at this moment. As time passed, the attacks of the two of them became more ferocious. It was as though they were determined to determine the outcome. In fact, judging from the strength of the two, unless it was a life-and-death battle, it would indeed be very difficult to determine the victor between the two of them. At that very moment, the two of them clearly wanted a fight to the death. Neither Yun Tianyi nor Xiao Xiao had any intention of stopping them. The two of them were fighting because of Yang Chun and Xiao Chun. At that moment, no one wanted to be the first to back down. Therefore, even though they saw that their subordinates were injured, they did not intend to stop the battle. Their injuries were getting more and more serious. In fact, up until now, the atmosphere of the battle had completely changed. This was no longer a spar, because it was impossible for a spar to be like this. Both of them wanted nothing more than to kill each other. Because of the current situation, Mutian Mountain and Hutian Sect were allies. Sword Sect and Moon Palace were also extremely close. Therefore, the relationship between the four great sects was naturally filled with hostility and enmity. Because of this, no one was willing to back down, no one was willing to lower their heads, and no one was willing to compromise. Seeing that the two elders of Mutian Mountain and Moon Palace were getting more and more ferocious as the battle went on, Dan Valley's Valley Master, Dan Exant, finally spoke. He looked at Yin Tianyi and Xiao Xiao and said calmly, "Both of you, as the saying goes, take a step back. The Dividing Mountain Grand Gathering is not a place to settle your grudges. Why don't both of you take a step back?" Dan Exant once again stepped forward to act as a mediator. Seeing this, Yin Tianyi said indifferently, "How can we stop before the outcome is decided?" Yin Tianyi clearly did not have any intention of stopping. Seeing this, Xiao Xiao coldly snorted and did not say anything. Seeing this, although Dan Exant did not want to see bloodshed at the Dividing Mountain Grand Gathering, Yin Tianyi and Xiao Xiao clearly had no intention of stopping. Therefore, Dan Exant naturally could not say anything. After all, with Yin Tianyi and Xiao Xiao's status, they did not need to listen to Dan Exant's orders. Dan Exant only spoke out of goodwill. Since they did not listen, there was nothing he could do. Dan Exant tried to persuade them, but it was completely useless. He could only choose to remain silent. Yin Tianyi and Xiao Xiao had no intention of stopping, and the battle continued. Under the crowd's gaze, 2 hours passed. The two elders in a fierce battle were both seriously injured. There was blood at the corner of their mouths, and there were many wounds on their bodies. Facing such a situation, Yin Tianyi took the initiative to speak. "All right, this is the Dividing Mountain Grand Gathering. It's best not to kill." "Hell, what's wrong? Are you afraid?" Yin Tianyi actually chose to stop after fighting for so long. Xiao Xiao sneered in response. However, hearing Yin Tianyi's words, the elder from Mutian Mountain also chose to stop immediately. Seeing this, the elder from Moon Palace also did the same. The two of them did not continue to attack, because if they continued to fight in such a situation, it would really be a life-and-death battle. At that time, both of them would probably be seriously injured. Xiao Xiao did not seem to give Yin Tianyi a way out. However, Yin Tianyi was not angry. He still had that iconic smile on his face as he said, nonchalantly, "Afraid? Sect Master Xiao must be joking. I just don't want to kill people in the Dividing Mountain Grand Gathering. If Sect Master Xiao feels that it is not enough, we can find another time. I will definitely accompany you to the end." After speaking, Yin Tianyi did not wait for Xiao Xiao's reply. As soon as he finished speaking, Yin Tianyi took the initiative to stand up and looked at the crowd. "Everyone, the purpose of this Dividing Mountain Gathering is to announce the arrival of a new era. In my opinion, since it's a new era, there must be new rules. It's time for those old rules and regulations to be eliminated," Yin Tianyi said loudly. Upon hearing his words, Dao Ju, Li Chun, Xiao Chun, and the other monstrous talents looked at Yin Tianyi with interest. Obviously, what Yin Tianyi was going to say next was the real focus. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2144. Yun Tiany's words let everyone know that the main point of this dividing grand meet was to break the previous rules and set new rules. Yun Tiany's words let everyone know that the main point of this dividing grand meet was to break the previous rules and set new rules. In fact, before the dividing grand meet began, many people had already guessed that the dividing grand meet would have another important function, which was to set new rules. With the arrival of a new era, the younger generation of cultivators would rise to the top. As a result, the rules set by the older generation of cultivators could no longer be followed, because the younger generation would definitely have to set their own rules. Sure enough, Yun Tiany's words clearly indicated this. Due to the fact that the younger generation was in power, they had the ability to set new rules. Therefore, Yun Tiany bluntly stated that the previous rules were no longer applicable. Moreover, what was even more unexpected was that after hearing Yun Tiany's words, none of the people present actually objected. This also proved that the other monstrous geniuses also agreed with Yun Tiany's words. Even Xiao Xiao, who was at loggerheads with Yun Tiany earlier, chose to remain silent this time and did not object. Seeing that no one objected, Yun Tiany revealed a faint smile and paused for a moment before he said loudly, "Everyone knows that there are 108 prefectures in the Great Thousand World. However, I feel that since it's a new era, it's obviously not appropriate to divide them like this. There needs to be some changes. Therefore, I suggest that we divide the 108 prefectures into 10 prefectures, and each prefecture will be ruled by a Ling Tian sect." Yun Tiany proposed the 10 prefectures, establishing 10 prefectures above the 108 prefectures. The division of the 10 prefectures would coincide with the 10 great Ling Tian sects, and each Ling Tian sect would rule over a prefecture. Upon hearing Yun Tiany's words, everyone's expression changed, including Dao Ju and the others. This was because Yun Tiany's suggestion would undoubtedly bring unimaginable shock and chaos to the Great Thousand World. Thinking about it, redividing the sphere of influence of the 10 great Ling Tian sects and setting up 10 prefectures, it could be said that the distribution of resources would be redone. Once cultivation resources were involved, not only the 10 great Ling Tian sects, but even the forces below them would definitely erupt into conflict. In that case, the entire Great Thousand World would be in complete chaos. However, no one had a reason to reject Yun Tiany's suggestion because it would definitely be beneficial to the 10 great Ling Tian sects. Of course, this did not include the Sword sect. This was because although the swords seemed to be on equal footing with the 10 great Ling Tian sects, it still had not been recognized by Tenzu's recognition. Hence, it was still not considered as a true Ling Tian sect. Moreover, if the Sword sect wanted to be ranked among the Ling Tian sects again, it would have to defeat an established Ling Tian sect. This was also a rule that could not be changed. Some rules could be broken, but some rules could not be broken. Therefore, Yun Tiany's suggestion was actually the most unfriendly to the Sword sect. This was because the Sword sect would not be able to get any benefits at all. Moreover, they would have to survive within the sphere of influence of one of the Ling Tian sects like a subsidiary force. This was obviously something that Xiao Chun and the entire Sword sect did not want to see. As soon as he finished speaking, Yun Tiany glanced at everyone who had different expressions on their faces before his gaze finally landed on Dao Ju and the other prodigies. "What do all of you think?" Yun Tiany asked. However, Xiao Xiao was the first to speak. "Why are there 10 prefectures instead of 11? How can the Sword sect be divided in this way?" Xiao Xiao was the first to speak up for Xiao Chen. This was because Yun Tiany's suggestion was clearly disregarding the Sword sect. It was as if he did not take the Sword sect seriously at all. In the face of Xiao Xiao's question, Yun Tiany merely smirked and glanced at Xiao Chen before he said, nonchalantly, "What about the Sword sect? Sect leader Xiao, are you crazy? Do you really think the Sword sect is qualified to be on equal footing with us, the 10 great Ling Tian sects? I'm usually too lazy to be calculative with them, but it doesn't mean the Sword sect is on equal footing with us. Since it's about dividing the land into 10 prefectures, what does it have to do with the Sword sect?" Yun Tianyi didn't think the sword sect was on equal footing with them, the 10 great Ling Tian sects. Therefore, they naturally weren't qualified to participate in the division of the land with them. Upon hearing Yun Tianyi's words, Yang Chun also said nonchalantly, "Indeed, the 10 great Ling Tian sects aren't something that any Tom, Dick, and Harry can compare to. You." Xiao Zhao's face turned cold when she heard Yun Tianyi and Yang Chen's words. Just as she was about to scold them, she was held back by Xiao Chun. After stopping Xiao Chun said something that no one expected. It was apparent that Yun Tianyi was targeting and looking down on him. However, Xiao Chun wasn't bothered at all. Instead, he said with a faint smile, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter the 10 prefectures it is. Swords Gate will not participate in it." Xiao Chun actually took the initiative to withdraw. Xiao was taken aback. Then, she looked at Xiao Chun in confusion and asked, "Junior brother, what are you doing?" Initially, Xiao wanted to fight for Xiao Chun with all her might. However, who would have thought that Xiao Chun would give up so easily without any hesitation? Could it be that Xiao Chun really didn't care about the division of the land? One had to know that if that was the case, then Swords Gate would have lost too much. In the face of Xiao Zhao's dissatisfaction and doubt, Xiao Chun chuckled and said, "It doesn't matter. Anyway, even if the land is divided into 10 prefectures, we still need to be able to defend it. When the time comes, we'll just replace them." As Xiao Chun spoke, he intentionally glanced at Yang Chun, who was standing nearby. When everyone heard Xiao Chun's words, they seemed to have understood something. They Dao Ju smiled excitedly, as though they were saying, "There's going to be a good show to watch." Xiao Chun took the initiative to give up on the competition for the land of the 10 prefectures, not because he was afraid of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects, but because Xiao Chun felt that instead of wasting his efforts here, he might as well snatch the land when the time came. To put it bluntly, in Xiao Chun's opinion, the Heavenly Sect was merely representing the Sword Sect in the division of the 10 prefectures. When the time came for the division of the land of the 10 prefectures, the Sword Sect would just replace them. As long as they defeated the Heavenly Sect, the land of the Heavenly Sect would still belong to the Sword Sect. Therefore, there was no need to waste their energy on these matters. At this moment, Xiao Chun displayed great confidence. His confidence and arrogance made it seem as though he regarded the Heavenly Sect as a pile of bones in a grave. All the prodigies present could not help but look at Xiao Chun in a new light, especially Dan Xian and the others who came into contact with Xiao Chun for the first time. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter, Chapter 2145, Yun Tianyi suggested that the 10 prefectures above the 108 prefectures would be divided into 10 prefectures that would be managed by the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. This was equivalent to telling the world that the 10 Great Ling Tian sects truly controlled the Great Thousand World. Yun Tianyi suggested that the 10 prefectures above the 108 prefectures would be divided into 10 prefectures that would be managed by the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. This was equivalent to telling the world that the 10 Great Ling Tian sects truly controlled the Great Thousand World. This was because once the 10 prefectures were successfully divided, all the forces in the Great Thousand World would undoubtedly become affiliated forces of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. This was understandable. For example, the prefectures that did not have the 10 Great Ling Tian sect in the past had now become the sphere of influence of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. Yun Tianyi's suggestion could be said to have completely demonstrated the overlord position of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. Of course, the Sword Sect was targeted by Yun Tianyi. However, Xiao Chun did not care about this at all and did not object to the division of the 10 prefectures. According to Yun Tianyi, the Sword Sect would not have a share even if the 10 prefectures were divided. However, Xiao Chun did not see it that way. Perhaps the Sword Sect would not be able to get a share of the 10 prefectures for the time being, but in the future, as long as the Sword Sect successfully became one of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects, the Sword Sect would naturally have a share of the 10 prefectures. Moreover, Xiao Chun's target was very clear, which was the coiling heaven sect. As long as the coiling heaven sect was defeated, the sword sect would naturally be able to replace it. Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Yang Chen's face instantly darkened, and he said coldly, "You're boasting shamelessly." Yang Chen naturally knew what Xiao Chen meant. Upon hearing Yang Chen's words, Xiao Chen did not say anything. Yin Tianyi merely glanced at Xiao Chen indifferently and did not say anything. Even Xiao Chen didn't reject Yin Tianyi's suggestion. With the unanimous agreement of all the sky prides and monstrous geniuses, the division of the 10 prefectures seemed to be a foregone conclusion. As for the sect masters and sect masters of the major forces, they obviously couldn't do anything about it. Yin Tianyi and the others were the ones who made the decisions. Looking at Xiao Chen and the others on the high platform, the various sect leaders and sect leaders present all had different expressions on their faces. Their eyes flickered with a somewhat complicated expression. It was not hard to imagine that once the division of the 10 prefectures was established, it would definitely be a great shock to the Great Thousand World. It would definitely completely change the situation of the entire Great Thousand World. Yin Tianyi's proposal was unanimously approved. However, no one was in a hurry to divide the 10 prefectures. After all, such a matter could not be resolved overnight. Each of the 10 great Ling Tian sects had to consider their own interests. Therefore, the division of the 10 prefectures would definitely take some time. After the proposal was approved, the various sky prides and monstrous geniuses began to voice out their own ideas. Of course, compared to Yin Tianyi's proposal of dividing the 10 prefectures, some of the subsequent proposals seemed somewhat insignificant. The dividing mountain grand meet had completely become a grand meet for the sky prides and monstrous geniuses to reformulate the rules. Not only did it signify the arrival of a new era, but it also told everyone present that a new era would obviously require new rules. After a full 3 days, the dividing mountain grand meet finally came to an end. The various sect leaders and sect leaders who came to participate in the grand meet left one after another. After sending off the various sect leaders and sect leaders, Dao Ju, Li Chun, Yin Tianyi, and the other sky prides and monstrous geniuses stayed behind because they wanted to begin discussing the division of the 10 prefectures. The division of the 10 prefectures seemed to have nothing to do with Xiao Chen. This was because the sword sect currently had no way of encroaching on the 10 prefectures. Therefore, Xiao Chen was also preparing to leave. Since Xiao Chen was about to leave, Xiao Xiao and Long Qing naturally sent him off personally. Along the way, Xiao Xiao spoke with some dissatisfaction. "Junior brother, why did you give up so easily? Why didn't you fight for it?" Xiao Xiao was clearly somewhat dissatisfied. He had always felt that the sword sect should also have a prefectural land. Upon hearing that, Long Qing also spoke up. "Little brother, as long as you want it, I will definitely support you." Long Qing and Xiao Xiao both supported Xiao Chen unconditionally. However, Xiao Chen only smiled in response. "So be it. Didn't I say that even if you obtain it, you have to be able to defend it?" Xiao Chen had no intention of arguing about the 10 prefectures at all. In Xiao Chen's opinion, the 10 prefectures were the 10 prefectures. In any case, he would just snatch it when the time came. In fact, the reason why Xiao Chen did not oppose the division of the 10 prefectures was because he was considering Dao Ju, Li Chun, and the others. Thinking about it, although the 10 prefectures and the 11 prefectures did not seem too different, if Xiao Chen insisted on dividing the great wide world into the 11 prefectures, it would definitely affect the interests of Dao Ju, Li Chun, and the others. After all, dividing the prefectures was equivalent to reducing the interests of everyone. Everyone understood such a simple logic. If that was the case, Xiao Chen would obviously offend everyone. Xiao Chen naturally would not do such a thing. Although Xiao Xiao and Long Qing might not care about this, the others would definitely not watch Xiao Chen snatch away their vested interests. Instead of offending everyone, it was better to go with the flow. In any case, the sword sect and the heavenly sect would definitely have a battle. As long as the heavenly sect was defeated, the sword sect would naturally replace the heavenly sect and have their own prefectures. In this way, not only would he not offend others, but he would also be able to achieve his goal. Wouldn't it be the best of both worlds? Xiao Chun had thought it through very clearly. That was why he did not openly oppose Yun Tian's suggestion. Seeing that Xiao Chun had made up his mind, Xiao Xiao and Long Qing had no choice but to nod in agreement. After sending Xiao Chun out of the Dizun mountain range, Xiao Xiao and Long Qing waved goodbye to Xiao Chun. "Little brother, be careful on the road." Xiao Chun took the lead and left the Dizun mountain range. As for the others, they stayed behind to discuss the division of the 10 prefectures. Regarding the division of the 10 prefectures, Xiao Chun could not intervene and was not interested in it for the time being. After Xiao Chun left, only Dao Ju and the other sect leaders of the 10 Greatling sect were left in the Dizun mountain range. Everyone gathered in the main hall. A map of the Great Thousand World had already appeared in front of them. Everyone began to divide the 10 prefectures. The division of the 10 prefectures was not a simple matter. After all, it involved everyone's interests. Moreover, the Great Thousand World was vast. Some places were rich, while others were barren. As on the 10 Great Ling sects, everyone would definitely want the rich place. As Dao Ju and the others began to discuss, the news of the 10 prefectures spread quickly in the outside world. Just as everyone had expected, when the news of Dao Ju and the others wanting to divide the 10 prefectures spread, the entire Great Thousand World was shaken. Regardless of whether they supported or opposed it, everyone attached great importance to this matter. This was because the division of the 10 prefectures was related to every cultivator in the Great Thousand World. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 2146. The news that the 10 Ling Tian sects were going to divide the 10 prefectures into 10 prefectures was widely spread in the Great Thousand World. After the sect leaders and sect leaders left, the Emperor Mountain Range, which should have been deserted, once again became the focus of the entire Great Thousand World. Countless pairs of eyes and people's gazes were once again focused on the Supreme Mountain Range. This was because Dao Ju and the other newly appointed sect leaders of the 10 Great Ling Tian sects were currently gathered here to discuss the division of the 10 prefectures. The 10 prefectures had completely broken the existing situation of the Great Thousand World and could be said to have opened a new chapter for the Great Thousand World. While everyone was focused on the division of the 10 prefectures, Xiao Chun took the lead and returned to the sword sect. Along the way, with Yang Song and the others accompanying them, there was no danger and no one had any objections to Xiao Chun's decision. Just as Xiao Chun had said, although the sword sect seemed to have given up on the division of the 10 prefectures, the sword sect would definitely have a share of the 10 prefectures in the future. They returned to the sword sect without encountering any danger along the way. At the same time, in the Emperor Mountain Range, Dao Ju, Li Chun, Yun Tian, and the others still had not reached a conclusion. Obviously, everyone was very cautious about the division of the 10 prefectures. It would probably take some time before there would be a conclusion. Xiao Chun was not too concerned about this. After returning to the sword sect, Xiao Chun's life returned to normal. Apart from cultivating, he spent every day with his family. As for the matters of the sword sect, unless it was necessary, Xiao Chun handed it over to Tsang Xing and the other deputy sect leaders to handle. He would just leave it to them. As time passed, the Emperor Mountain Range still attracted the attention of countless people. After so many days, everyone thought that the final result would be out soon. As expected, after another 3 days, Dao Ju and the others finally reached a conclusion. The entire Great Thousand World was indeed divided into 10 prefectures. The 10 prefectures were successfully divided. At the same time, Dao Ju and the other Ling Tian sects also jointly announced the establishment of the 10 prefectures to the public. Prefectures were set up in prefectures that covered at least 10 prefectures. Naturally, the various forces within the prefectures naturally became the subordinate forces of the Ling Tian sects that ruled the prefectures. After successfully announcing the establishment of the 10 prefectures and the division of the 10 prefectures, the various major forces could not help but look at it. The news was announced to the public. As for how they would control their own prefecture, it would depend on Dao Ju and the others' abilities. Whether they would use brute force to suppress or use virtue to convince others, it would depend on their own choice. However, it was undeniable that the Great Thousand World to heaven to the Great Thousand to the prefectures. However, compared to the others, the person who was in the worst mood was obviously Yangchun. This was because he was obviously targeted during the division of the 10 prefectures. Compared to the prefectures controlled by the others, the area that the Coiling Heaven sect obtained was not bad. However, there was a very troublesome problem. The Sword sect's Jian province was divided into one of the prefectures controlled by the Coiling Heaven sect. Dao Ju and the others had intentionally divided the Sword sect's Jian province into the Coiling Heaven sect's sphere of influence. Everyone knew that the current strength of the Sword sect was not much weaker than the 10 Great Ling Tian sects. Such a sect force could be said to be a thorn in the flesh no matter whose sphere of influence it was in. It would make people feel threatened at all times. Since that was the case, in addition to the enmity between the Coiling Heaven sect and the Sword sect, they might as well divide the Sword sect and the Coiling Heaven sect together and let them fight to the death. They had no choice but to accept this fact. This also meant that although Yangchen's Coiling Heaven sect obtained a prefecture, in reality, Yangchen's prefecture would definitely not be under the Coiling Heaven sect's control. This was because the Sword sect would obviously not listen to any orders from the Coiling Heaven sect, let alone become a subordinate force of the Coiling Heaven sect. A mountain could not accommodate 2 tigers. Due to the existence of the Sword sect, the prefecture that the Coiling Heaven sect obtained could be said to be divided into 2. Yangchen's expression was a little ugly. This was already an outcome that could not be changed because this was something that everyone had unanimously agreed on. Even Yangchun could not change it. Just as Dao Ju and the others came to a conclusion, Xiao Chun, who was in the Sword sect, naturally received the news. After learning that the Sword province had been divided into the Coiling Heaven sect's prefecture, Xiao Chun couldn't help but laugh loudly. Haha, it seems that Yang Chun has been played by them. Xiao Chun laughed loudly. Nangong Guan, who was beside him, also revealed a faint smile and said, "No one wants to have an uncontrollable force in their sphere of influence, so obviously no one is willing to accept the Sword province." Therefore, Dao Ju and the others probably threw this hot potato to Yang Chun. No one wanted to have an uncontrollable force like the Sword sect in their sphere of influence, so naturally, they could only throw it to Yang Chun. Xiao Chun and Nangongwan immediately saw through Dao Ju and the others' thoughts. Hearing Nangongwan's words, Xiao Chun smiled and said, "Yang Chen's mood should be very bad right now. Senior brother, how do you think he'll deal with us? He'll probably ignore us for now. After all, he knows that our Sword sect definitely won't listen to the Coiling Heaven sect." Nangongwan replied with a smile. If the Coiling Heaven sect wanted to control their own prefecture, they probably wouldn't take the initiative to provoke the Sword sect for now. Instead, they would make a move on other factions. Hearing Nangongwan's words, Xiao Qin smiled and nodded, then muttered softly, "A mountain cannot accommodate 2 tigers. Next, let's see who will become the true overlord of this prefecture." Compared to the other prefectures, the situation in the Coiling Heaven sect and the Sword sect's prefecture was clearly more special. A mountain with 2 tigers was definitely not something that could be maintained for long. As such, the situation in the Sword sect and the Coiling Heaven sect's prefecture was clearly even more tense. Moreover, because the 2 sides were divided into 2 prefectures, it indirectly caused the conflict between them to escalate. Even if they didn't mention their previous enmity, just because of their vested interests, it was impossible for the 2 sides to coexist peacefully. It was simple logic to allow others to sleep soundly beside one's bed. As such, the Coiling Heaven sect was bound to destroy the Sword sect, and the Sword sect would definitely do everything possible to replace it. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Nangongwan seemed to have guessed Xiao Chen's meaning. Looking at Xiao Chun, a faint smile flashed at her eyes. Junior brother, what do you mean? Since senior brother has already guessed it, why ask when you already know the answer? Xiao Chun lightly smiled. Begging for your collection, begging for your monthly votes, begging for your recommendation. End of chapter. Chapter 2147. Hearing this, Nangongwan also smiled faintly. The two of them looked at each other, but didn't say anything. Everything was understood without words. The division of the 10 prefectures had been completed. The next step was to see how the 10 great Ling Tian sects would deal with their own matters in a short period of time. After all, according to the current division, the area of a prefecture was not small, and there were countless forces of various sizes within it. It was not an easy task for the 10 great Ling Tian sects to stabilize the situation. However, with the powerful force of the 10 great Ling Tian sects, it was not a problem to forcefully suppress them. As for other aspects, they could deal with them slowly. Half a month passed very quickly after the 10 great Ling Tian sects announced the division of the 10 prefectures. The 10 great Ling Tian sects had also issued a summons to the outside world one after another, gathering all the forces in their respective prefectures. Gathering all the forces in their respective prefectures was something that had to be done because the 10 great Ling Tian sects wanted to announce their overlord status. However, just as the 10 great Ling Tian sects issued the summons one after another, an extremely unique scene occurred in the Hetien region. With the birth of the 10 prefectures, the prefecture controlled by the Hetien sect was called the Hetien Prefecture. However, just as the Hetien sect issued the summons to the various forces in the Hetien Prefecture, the Sword sect in the Sword Province suddenly announced to the outside world that the Sword Province was the Sword Mansion. It was obvious that they had broken away from the Hetien Prefecture. Moreover, the Sword sect also issued a summons to the outside world almost at the same time, similar to the Hetien sect, to gather all the major forces in the Sword sect. Following the actions of the Sword sect, the Hetien Prefecture seemed to have been forcefully divided into two by the Sword sect. The Sword Palace openly expressed that they did not recognize the position of the Hetien sect in the Hetien Prefecture and even established their own Sword Mansion. This naturally caused an uproar in the Great Thousand World. It was also because of the actions of the Sword sect that the situation in the Hetien Prefecture became more turbulent compared to the other prefectures. The various forces in the Hetien Prefecture were now faced with the most crucial choice: which side to take. Judging from the current situation, it was obvious that the Sword sect and the Hetien sect were at odds. Whether the various forces would choose the Hetien sect or the Sword sect was obviously an important choice. Moreover, this choice was crucial. Once they made the wrong choice, the consequences would be unimaginable. Seeing that everyone chose to remain silent, the anger in Yang Chen's heart grew even stronger. In fact, Yang Chen had already expected the situation in the Katian sect to be more troublesome. However, he did not expect that it would end up like this. The 10 prefectures were supposed to be shared by the 10 great Ling Tian sects, and everyone had agreed to it. However, before he could even warm his seat in the United Heaven Prefecture, half of the area had been forcibly taken away by the Sword sect. Although the 10 great Ling Tian sects did not acknowledge the existence of the Sword sect, it was a fact that the Sword sect had appeared in the Katian sect. Obviously, the Katian sect had no way of interfering with the Sword sect. The coldness in Yang Chen's eyes grew stronger as he smashed the table in front of him. He stood up abruptly and said fiercely, "Xiao Chun, if I don't destroy your Sword sect, I swear I'm not human." A mountain could not accommodate two tigers. However, two ferocious tigers had appeared in the Katian sect, and there was a deep enmity between them. The Sword sect and the Katian sect were bound to have a battle. This was already inevitable. Facing the furious Yang Chun, the elders of the Katian sect present did not dare to say anything. Everyone knew that Yang Chun was completely enraged at this moment. His hatred for Xiao Chun and the Sword sect had also reached its peak. If he spoke at this moment, It was obvious that he was looking for trouble, begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 2148. Yang Chun was clearly enraged. None of the Heavenly Gate elders present dared to say anything when facing Yang Chun. They were afraid that they would become Yang Chen's punching bag. After a long while, Yang Chen's anger gradually subsided. However, from his increasingly cold gaze, everyone knew that Yang Chen's anger hadn't disappeared. He had merely forcefully suppressed it. The cold light in Yang Chen's eyes made him look like a wild beast that could devour a person at any time. He coldly said, "Since they want to join the sword sect, then I'll make them all disappear. Pass down the order to surround and kill all the forces that have joined the sword sect, regardless of their size. Kill them all." Nearly half of the forces in the He Tian mansion had chosen the sword sect. This infuriated Yang Chun. There was no need to talk about the forces in the Jian province. After all, the Jian province was the headquarters of the sword sect. Thus, it was understandable for the forces in the Jian province to join the sword sect. However, there were also many forces outside the Jian province that had chosen the sword sect. As a result, Yang Chun wouldn't show any mercy. Since these forces had chosen the sword sect, they had to be responsible for their own choices. Outside the Jian province, the sword sect's forces were still very weak. The forces that had joined the sword sect had become the targets of the He Tian sect. Obviously, Yang Chun was venting all the anger in his heart on these forces. It wasn't the time to start an all-out war with the sword sect. As a result, he could only make an example out of them. He wanted everyone to see that the He Tian sect was the true overlord of the He Tian mansion. Fortunately, Yang Chun didn't lose his rationality due to his anger and didn't directly declare war on the sword sect. Hearing Yang Chen's words, the elders of the He Tian sect all secretly sighed in relief. As long as they didn't get carried away by anger and directly attack the sword sect, everything else was easy to deal with. As for those large and small forces that chose to join the sword sect, they didn't pose a threat to the heavenly sect. After Yang Chun gave the order to kill, the experts of the heavenly sect moved out one after another. They began to attack the forces outside the sword sect that had chosen to side with the sword sect. The unusual movements of the heavenly merging sect naturally reached Xiao Chen's ears immediately. Given the current situation, no matter which of the two sects made the slightest move, the other party would be the first to know. Xiao Chen, who was cultivating in the sword sect, suddenly revealed a faint smile when he heard that the experts of the Coiling Heaven sect had moved out. Yang Chun, it seems that you still don't know that only those who win the hearts of the people can win the world. He immediately guessed why so many experts of the Coiling Heaven sect had moved out at the same time. In other words, all of this was part of Xiao Chen's plan. From the beginning, Xiao Chun didn't hide the list of forces that had chosen to join the sword sect. He even intentionally revealed it to the Coiling Heaven sect. Therefore, Yang Chun clearly knew how many forces there were outside the sword sect. Those forces had clearly chosen to join the sword sect. Xiao Chun chuckled softly. Then, he called Qing Yao over and said, "Go see the vice sect master. Call them over." Xiao Chun summoned Song Xing and the other vice sect masters. Clearly, Xiao Chun already had a plan to deal with the actions of the Coiling Heaven sect and was already prepared. Xiao Chun was already prepared. On the other side, the experts of the Coiling Heaven sect were rushing to various places in the He Tian sect. For a moment, the He Tian sect was in complete chaos. Many forces had received the news. In many cities, there were forces that had chosen to join the sword sect. At this moment, they were choosing to retreat. The Spirit Crane sect was located beside the White Lake. It was a first-rate force, and its strength wasn't weak. It had 3 end realm experts in the sect. This time, between the sword sect and the Coiling Heaven sect, the Spirit Crane sect had also chosen the sword sect and was willing to follow the sword sect. At the same time, the Spirit Crane sect was also one of the strongest sects among the many forces that had chosen the sword sect. However, at this moment, in the main hall of the Spirit Crane sect, a group of higher-ups had gathered together. Their expressions were extremely solemn. Just a moment ago, the Spirit Crane sect had received news that the Coiling Heaven sect was preparing to attack the forces that had chosen to join the Sword sect. Moreover, they wouldn't leave anyone alive. The moment they received this news, the hearts of the higher-ups of the Spirit Crane sect sank. After all, although the Spirit Crane sect was strong, they obviously couldn't go against the Coiling Heaven sect. The difference between the two was like a strong man and child. There was no comparison at all. Moreover, according to the latest news, the Spirit Crane sect was on the list of the Coiling Heaven sect. They were one of the first targets. It was said that the experts of the Coiling Heaven sect were led by a total of 5 End Realm Elders. At this moment, they were already on the way to the Coiling Heaven sect. Facing such a situation, the higher-ups of the Spirit Crane sect naturally took it seriously. In the main hall, an End Realm expert of the Spirit Crane sect said with a cold expression, "Damn it. When two tigers fight, we can only choose. The Coiling Heaven sect can't do anything to the Sword sect, so they're going to attack us? Isn't that a little too overbearing?" The 3 End Realm experts of the Spirit Crane sect had already become old ancestors. Chapter 2149. Chi Mu suggested moving the sect to the Jian province because the Sword sect had enough power to protect the Spirit Crane sect in the Jian province. However, although Chi Mu's suggestion was correct, the Spirit Crane sect's higher-ups pointed out the problem in one sentence time. Now that the experts from the Katian sect were already on their way, it was obviously too late to move the sect to the Sword province. After all, there were at least 100,000 disciples in the Spirit Crane sect. If so many people wanted to move to the Sword province, they would definitely not be able to move quickly. They would soon be caught up by the people from the Katian sect. Following the Spirit Crane sect's higher-ups' words, a direct disciple of the Spirit Crane sect hurriedly ran in with a look of excitement on his face. "Sect leader, good news. The Sword sect has responded." Originally, when Chi Mu received the news that the Heavenly sect was preparing to attack the Sword sect, he immediately sent the news back to the Sword sect. After all, since they had already chosen the Sword sect, a force like the Spirit Crane sect could already be considered as a subsidiary force of the Sword sect. When faced with an unbeatable opponent like the Heavenly sect, the best way was naturally to seek help from the Sword sect. It had only been 4 to 6 hours since Chi Mu sent a request for help to the Sword sect. The Sword sect had responded so quickly. Hearing this, Chi Mu's eyes involuntarily flashed with excitement. He immediately said to the disciple, "Quick, show it to me." As he spoke, the disciple passed the sound transmission talisman sent by the Sword sect to Chi Mu. The sound transmission talisman in Chi Mu's hand quickly turned into a ray of golden light and entered Chi Mu's mind. Soon, Chi Mu's mind rang with Xiao Chen's voice. In an instant, Chi Mu could tell that the voice was from Xiao Chun. He completely did not expect Xiao Chun to personally reply to his letter. Forcefully suppressing the excitement in his heart, Chi Mu focused on listening to Xiao Chen's reply. Xiao Chen's reply was actually very simple. First, he asked Chi Mu to arrange for the entire Spirit Crane sect to move to the Sword province. They did not have to enter the Sword province, but they had to leave the White Lake for the time being. Secondly, the purpose of leaving the experts of the Spirit Crane sect behind was to resist the pursuit of the Coiling Heaven sect. Of course, the Spirit Crane sect alone would definitely not be able to contend against the Coiling Heaven sect. Therefore, Xiao Chen also told Chi Mu that the Sword sect's reinforcements were on their way. They only needed to hold on for a while to resolve the crisis. In the end, Xiao Chen said to Chi Mu in a deep voice, "Sect Master Chi Mu, since your sect has chosen the Sword sect will definitely not disappoint you and the entire Spirit Crane sect. Sect Master Chi Mu, please believe in me and the Sword sect." Shao Chun had also used such a simple method to firmly pull the large and small forces that had just joined the sword sect's camp together. Speaking of which, this was all thanks to Yang Chun. If he had not issued a kill order to these forces, the sword sect would probably have to put in a lot of hard work to make these forces submit completely. Yang Chun clearly had not realized this yet. At this moment, he was only thinking about how to vent the anger in his heart. He had not considered that his actions would actually cause him to lose the hearts of the people. It was not only the forces that had pledged their allegiance to the sword sect, but even the forces that had pledged their allegiance to the Coiling Heaven sect would feel bitterly disappointed in the Coiling Heaven sect as time passed. There was nothing wrong with killing decisively, but there was no benefit in killing cruelly. No one would want to ask a tiger for its skin every day because no one could be sure that this ferocious tiger would not bite you one day. In a mountain range not far from the White Lake, there was also the mountain gate of a first-rate force. Unlike the Spirit Crane sect, this first-rate force had chosen the Coiling Heaven sect, so this time they were not threatened by the Coiling Heaven sect. However, at this moment, at the peak of the back mountain, two old men were sitting opposite each other. One of them was looking in the direction of the Spirit Crane sect with a complicated look in his eyes. The Coiling Heaven sect has indeed gone overboard this time. They don't even have the slightest bit of magnanimity left. They've completely lost the magnanimity of one of the 10 great Lingtian sects. This old man belonged to the Coiling Heaven sect's camp, but now, even he felt that the Coiling Heaven sect had gone overboard because the Coiling Heaven sect's target this time was not the sword sect, but the large and small forces that had chosen the sword sect. They did not dare to attack the sword sect, so they vented their anger on the various forces. In this way, they had indeed made a fool of themselves, and no one could see the magnanimity of one of the 10 great Lingtian sects at all. On the contrary, the sword sect had fully displayed the magnanimity and boldness of a great sect in this matter. Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation. End of chapter. Sect Master, we won't be able to stop the Heaven Gate by ourselves. If the experts of the sword sect don't arrive in time, then this elder was worried that the reinforcement from the sword gate would not be able to arrive in time. If that was the case, then the people who stayed behind would be in danger. However, after hearing his words, Chi Mu did not hesitate in the slightest and directly rejected the idea. No, Sect Master Shao Chun isn't that kind of person. If you have really met him, you will know how ridiculous your doubts are. Chi Mu's worship of Shao Chun had indeed become stronger and stronger, and he trusted Shao Chun unconditionally. He was just like a little fanboy. His eyes were filled with confidence. It wasn't confidence in himself, but confidence in Shao Chun. As soon as Chi Mu's voice fell, the 3 patriarchs of the Spirit Crane sect appeared in the sky and looked into the distance. Chi Mu's master said with a solemn expression, "They're here." These 2 simple words caused everyone's expression to freeze. "They're here." Everyone knew what was coming. As expected, just as Chi Mu's master finished speaking, hundreds of experts from the heavenly sect appeared in the sky above the Spirit Crane sect. The ones leading them were indeed 5 End Realm Elders. The 5 End Realm Elders led the group. Looking at the almost empty Spirit Crane sect, one of the elders opened his mouth and said, "Spirit Crane sect, I'll give you one last chance. Submit or die. Submit or die." Hearing the words of the Heaven Gate Elder, Chi Mu and the experts of the Spirit Crane sect flew up and came to the side of their master. They looked at the 5 End Realm Elders of the Heaven Gate and said, "Die? Do you really think that the Heaven Gate is the only big sect here? Do you think the Sword Sect is just a decoration?" Obviously, they didn't have any intention of submitting. Seeing this, the faces of the 5 elders of the Heaven Gate sank. Then, the elder of the Heaven Gate who spoke earlier shouted in a deep voice, "Since that's the case, then don't blame anyone. Kill. If they didn't submit, then they could only die." As the elder of the Heaven Gate finished speaking, the experts of the Heaven Gate immediately launched an attack. In an instant, There were waves of terrifying spiritual energy fluctuations in the sky above the Spirit Crane sect. The spiritual energy fluctuations that erupted from the fierce battle spread far away. Even the many disciples of the Spirit Crane sect who had already retreated could feel it. In the sky far away, there were close to 100,000 Spirit Crane sect disciples. At this moment, they couldn't help but turn their heads and look in the direction of the sect. At this moment, there were terrifying aftershocks of the battle constantly spreading over. Everyone was clear that the sect master and the people of the Heaven Gate had already started fighting. The experts of the Heaven Gate had already arrived. The group of Spirit Crane sect disciples knew very well that the strength of the Spirit Crane sect was no match for the Heaven Gate. But now, the sect master and the experts of the sect were fighting a bloody battle with the experts of the Heaven Gate for them. Many people's eyes were red. They didn't know if Chi, Mu, and the other experts of the sect would still be alive if this battle continued. They could only rely on the Sword Sect now. They could only hope that the experts of the Sword Sect would arrive soon. Everyone was praying that the experts of the Sword Sect would arrive soon. However, at this moment, the elders of the Spirit Crane sect who were responsible for protecting the disciples suddenly felt an extremely powerful aura approaching them quickly. There were many people, and they were extremely powerful. In an instant, the elders became nervous and couldn't help but shout, "Be on guard." They didn't know if the people coming were experts of the Heaven Gate. If they were, then the disciples of the Spirit Crane sect could only fight to the death. Although the chances were slim, they could only do so. Just as the disciples of the Spirit Crane sect were on guard, from the opposite direction, a team of hundreds of people quickly appeared in front of everyone. When they saw the people who came, the disciples of the Spirit Crane sect were stunned at first. Then they all cheered excitedly. Through the clothes of these people, the disciples of the Spirit Crane sect immediately recognized that they were experts of the Sword Sect and not the people of the Heaven Gate. The experts of the Sword Sect that they had been waiting for finally appeared in front of everyone at this moment. Moreover, looking at the young man who was leading the group, one of the elders of the Spirit Crane sect couldn't hide his excitement. He cupped his hands and bowed. "May I ask if Sect Master Xiao Chun himself has arrived? Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation." End of chapter. After breaking through to the small perfection realm, Xiao Qin's sword body had undergone a qualitative change. It was completely different from before. Seeing that his attack was blocked so easily by Xiao Chun, the Heavenly Sect elder exclaimed in disbelief. Impossible! Xiao Chun was only at the small perfection realm, so how could he block his attack so easily? The Heavenly Sect elder couldn't accept the result in front of him. This was simply a joke. However, facing the elder's shock, Xiao Chun still said calmly, "If you want to fight, then be more serious. If your strength is only like this, then you really have to stay here today." The contempt in Xiao Chen's words made the Heavenly Sect elder even more furious. He immediately hollered. Then, hot magma spiritual energy appeared around him. The hot magma caused the surrounding space to distort. He shouted at Xiao Chun, "Little kid, don't look down on me." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. In a chapter. Chapter 2153. Little brat, don't look down on me. Being looked down upon by Xiao Chun, this Hitian sect elder was completely enraged. He had lived for so many years. When he was in the Great Thousand World, Xiao Chun probably didn't even make sound. However, today he was being looked down upon by Xiao Chun again and again. With a furious roar, the elder seemed to have transformed into an erupting volcano. Countless amounts of hot magma continued to erupt from his body. That frightening aura was indeed frightening. Looking at this Hetien sect elder who was wrapped in magma, Xiao Chun revealed an inexplicable smile and said calmly, "This is interesting." To be honest, this was the first time Xiao Chun faced off against an End Realm expert alone. When he was in the Wood World, although Xiao Chun had the experience of fighting against an End Realm expert, he had teamed up with Xiao Chun. This time, facing this Hetien sect elder, Xiao Chun didn't have any helpers. However, compared to when he was in the Wood World, Xiao Chen's own strength was much stronger. Therefore, in this battle, Xiao Chen wanted to see how big the gap was between him and an End Realm expert. Or rather, whether or not he had the ability to defeat an End Realm expert. When he heard Xiao Chen's words and saw his calm expression, this Etienne sect elder completely exploded in anger. "Little brat, you are asking for death." As he spoke, the elder from the heavenly gate raised the giant axe in his hand. At this moment, the fiery red giant axe in the elder's hand was like an erupting volcano. Flame explosion. He shouted furiously. Then, this elder chopped down with his axe. This axe was on a completely different level from the previous one. Under Xiao Chen's disdain, this Hetien sect elder was completely enraged and used his killing move. Facing this violent attack, Xiao Chun didn't have any intention of dodging. With a thought, blood-red long swords appeared around Xiao Chen's body. Compared to before, the blood swords around Xiao Chun were clearly brighter red. At the same time, the sharp sword energy was several times denser. "Go!" Xiao Chun shouted softly. Along with his voice, these countless long swords charged towards this Hetien sect elder's giant axe. The two collided fiercely. Under the control of Xiao Chen's mind, these blood-red longswords quickly formed a huge sword net. A sword net formed by countless blood swords. The sword net firmly blocked this Hetien sect elder's attack, causing it to be unable to advance at all. After his sword body broke through to the initial perfection realm, Xiao Chun was able to control these blood swords formed in the sword world with greater ease. He could almost control them as if they were his own arms. There was no need to wait or prepare at all. As long as Xiao Chen wanted, these blood swords could attack or defend according to Xiao Chen's thoughts at any time and place.